Dropping that culture. 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 Dropping that culture.
All right, we're back. Round
All
two.
right, folks. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Hope y'all folks are enjoying your, coronavirus quarantine just like the rest of us. Nice and fun. Yeah.
And apparently it's going to last all the way through to...
All right, dropping that culture with you. You want to interrupt me? You want to keep interrupting me?
It cut out. It cut out, man.
Can I say my shit?
Yeah, first world problem.
Can I say my shit?
After you.
Thank you. And welcome to Dropping That Culture with JD and AJ. I'm JD.
And I'm interrupting.
It's going to be like this the whole fucking show.
Probably.
God, man.
It's authentic.
All right, so
People want it.
yeah, I know, and it's sad, but I didn't get that. All right, so folks, again, another week here, quarantine in Los Angeles. Again, we're doing the best we can to make sure you folks are given a good show with the format that we have been given, thanks to Zoom here. Again, this is our second video shoot, and as you can see, we're both smoking cigars, enjoying ourselves. Mine is a little more cheap than what AJ's got. So AJ, why don't you go ahead and explain what you got, man?
I'm actually smoking my last Alhambra Vanilla. It's a Filipino cigar. It's like 30-something years old. My father gave it to me, and that's everything I know about it. I couldn't even tell you what the price point is on it. It's not bad.
Well, the one I got from the liquor store.
J&M, right?
Yeah, J&M. Yeah, so very simple, very cheap cigar. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing too crazy, but it does its job. That's really what it is.
Well, and all the regular cigar shops are closed, so you got to make do with what you can find.
Yes, unfortunately, that is true. All the high-end stuff is on lockdown right now, so we basically have to deal with. Now, let's go ahead and get from the doom and gloom of the quarantine and all the other crap, and let's get into this show like we usually do, and get into our regular topics and our regular segments. So, first off, we're gonna start off with our favorite here, 7 Degrees of Eddie Murphy, where I can connect any major American film star to the great Eddie Murphy within 7 movies. And I'll go ahead and do the intro that AJ loves so much.
The best.
Cheers the throat, man.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
It's that rolling.
Yeah. All right, so what names you got for me this week, AJ?
We'll start out with the great 1990s film star, David Arquette.
David Arquette. Easy. David Arquette was in, Scream 2 with Jada Pinkett. Jada Pinkett was in The Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy.
That was a little simpler than I was hoping.
Yeah.
How about Vin Diesel, Pitch Black himself?
Pitch Black. Okay. Vin Diesel. Oh, another relatively easy one. Vin Diesel was in. No. You know what? I'm not gonna go that route. Let's go another route. Yeah. Okay. All right. Vin Diesel was in Boiler Room with Nia Long. Nia Long was in Big Mama's House with Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence was in Life with Eddie Murphy.
All right. Go a little bit older. We'll see if you get there.
What's up?
Poitier.
Sidney Poitier?
Yep.
Got it. Already. All right. Sidney Poitier was in. Which one I don't want to go?
I don't know. What do
You know,
got?
I'll keep some. Okay, Sidney Poitier was in. Sidney Poitier was in Let's Do It Again with John Amos. John Amos wasn't Coming to America with Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, it was easy.
I was like, why am I wrecking my brain on this? Yeah, there it is right there.
All right, not bad. That was pretty quick.
He's right. And John Amos was what's his name? Kansas City Mac in that movie. Kansas City Mac, and then that's where they got the name Biggie Smalls was from. Let's Do It Again.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Calvin Lockhart played Biggie Smalls in Let's Do It Again. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a killer round of 7 Degrees with Eddie Murphy. I don't think I can ever listen to this again without actually seeing the facial expressions with it. Yeah, Robin.
It does help, doesn't it? Yeah, the head, the head and shit. Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go into another segment here. WWBS. What will Busey say? We're gonna do a rant, improvised rant, through the mind of the great Gary Busey. So, what are we ranting about? And let's not do something coronavirus related. Let's do something else.
We didn't do anything coronavirus related last time. You were talking about CGI cat buttholes last time.
Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, give me one.
All right. Well, just because you and I had some offline conversations about it, and everybody seems to be working out a lot more these days. I'm curious what Busey thinks about jogging or running. It might be jogging. It may be a soft J. I don't know.
Soft J. What do I think about exercise? Well, exercise is important. You know, helps to maintain the homeostasis. You know, maintain your core, maintain your overall physical health. Physical health is so important nowadays, particularly with what's going on. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but, you know, I like to jog every once in a while, but me personally, I usually like to take a nice big hit of some sort of amphetamine, and then I just go running. I mean, I'm running. I'm not talking about a jog around the block. No, I'm talking about miles. I'm running. Like, I'm running to the fact I'm wearing out the soles of my shoes. My feet are bloody. Just running. And of course, I look nuts doing it, but you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I'm just gonna run and run. I feel like I'm having my own personal Forrest Gump moment. Remember, I just run. And next thing you know, I'm starting initially in Long Beach. I end up in goddamn El Segundo, you know, just running. And it's great. It's fan-fucking-tastic. And you see all of nature. You see the woods, you see the trees, you see the people, you see animals. And I just keep running and running and running. Then, of course, I pass out, get back up, run some more. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, run a little bit more, pass out again, run some more. Yeah, I just keep going, man. And, run some more, stop, maybe go to like some one of those like food or pho like shops, give me some noodles, keep running again. Tiger blood.
I was less insane than usual, but you know what?
Very simple. Keeping it simple today, man.
Well, I did give a simple prompt. I think I need to get a little more specific if I really want to get into the wilder side of Mr. Busey.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as opposed to him running from Long Beach to El Segundo.
I mean, that was just a Forrest Gumpian kind of a thing. I think maybe we should get into DMT next time. See what.
Okay, I'm fine with that. All right. Now, before we get into dropping that news, which will be relatively quick, we want to do some plugs here. Like, we've been kind of on and off on this for the last few weeks, but we need to get back on it because of the fact that, you know, there's a lot of people that's inside right now. You should go and check out different things. Now, first off, we're going to go ahead and thank one of our first sponsors. That will be Belsaverse, located on Facebook and also on Instagram. There also is the Belsaverse store at teespring.com. There are several T-shirts there that are still, you know, waiting to be sold. You know what I'm saying? There's some good designs there. I'm working on a few other ones. Hopefully we should have ones very soon. I have one particular that I'm very, very proud of. It's more or less a picture of me saying this is Jadero Belser because I'm that dope. You should get that shirt. It's a conversation starter. And people will be like, who the fuck is that? I'm like, hey, that's Jadero Belser. Oh, okay. Yeah. A lot of people, you know, nowadays, you know, it really don't take much to entice people. So, like I said, go ahead and go to Belsaverse at teespring.com. get yourself a shirt. It's great. Get some great shirts. Get yourself a conversation starter. You know what I'm saying? And we also have hoodies, women's apparel, things of that nature. And also check out Belsaverse on Facebook and Instagram. Both the groups and pages are open. Check us out. You know what I'm saying? We usually put in a lot of news in terms of pop culture. But I usually put in a little something anyway, just in case, anyway, just to keep things festive. And we also have another sponsor.
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
What women's apparel do you have?
Same shirts, just for women.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Could be doing Lakers.
You asked. There's your answer. But like I said, go ahead and let us know about our next sponsor.
So our next sponsor is ushooker.com. Do you like rugby? Do you like hookers? Do you like rucking? Well, then US Hookers for you. Wearing one of their wonderful shirts right here today. Says Hookers Love to Ruck. It's got this awesome, that's actually faded now because I wear this all the time. My US Hooker logo right here on the side. American flag. Make sure people know that you're a fan of US rugby. If you don't know anything about rugby, go to ushooker.com. They'll teach you everything that you need to know about it. Also find them on Facebook. They got a lot of good information there. A dozen or so brand new designs that are absolutely killer. T-shirts, hoodies, tank tops. They got some noise on your end?
Mm-hmm. Hold on.
No.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to make sure because your audio kind of went out there a little bit. I just want to make sure everything's good to go. Yeah. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay. I don't know what that was. All right.
But yeah, go to ushooker.com, all kinds of cool gear, learn about an awesome sport. I grew up playing football. I love football. A bunch of guys on my team, a bunch of Kiwis, guys from New Zealand. They taught me about it. I learned it through the All Blacks, which honestly are one of the best teams in the And here's the best part. You don't have to decide between football and rugby. Football season ends, rugby season begins. So jump in, you love it. It's like
All right, cool. All right, now let's go ahead and drop into dropping that news.
Dropping that news.
On my end, I have nothing.
All right. Well, then I'll jump in. The two biggest stories I could think of right now, again, speaking about rugby, unfortunately, USA Rugby had to file Chapter 11 with the massive disruption to the rugby season, World Rugby, everything happening this year. They've had to go and restructure their debt. They're not going away. They're supported by the board, lots of financial backers. We also support them as a country because it's our national team. They play at the Olympics, they play in the World Cup, all that stuff. So they're still around. This isn't great news for them, obviously, because anytime a business is in that position, it's challenging. Getting out of it's challenging, but that would be that on the world of sports. And then probably the biggest single piece of news out this week for entertainment, they just announced at Lionsgate they're going to be dropping about a dozen employees from the film marketing and distribution side. How permanent or how short-term that is, they haven't said. So they're at a minimum being furloughed, at a maximum it's put out potentially problematic. Hopefully this is just a temporary.
Okay. And that has been dropping that news. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. So
dropping that news.
Yay. Yay.
All right, so the meat and potatoes, we are going to talk about escape from LA while not being able to escape from LA.
Yeah. Well, actually, more accurately, we're going to be talking about the works of the great John Carpenter and his many films. Both AJ and I are huge. Yeah. Yeah, so me and AJ are both huge John Carpenter fans, and this has been one of the subjects that have been on our mind ever since we started this podcast. So we've always wanted to maybe designate a whole episode just to the work of one director or one. We've done John Landis already, so might as well go ahead and John Carpenter was another one of my favorites. So I'll go ahead and start it off with a quote from John Carpenter himself. In France, I'm an auteur. In Germany, a filmmaker. In Britain, a genre filmmaker. And in the USA, a bum.
Yeah.
So that pretty much that's very that's very John Carpenter. John Carpenter himself was born John Howard Carpenter on January 16th, 1948 in Carthage, New York. Nickname is JC. Nice. He was born in Carthage to Milton Jean and Howard Ralph Carpenter. His family moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where his dad was a professor at the head of music, apparently at Western Kentucky University. He attended Western Kentucky University and then was transferred to USC Film School out here in LA. That's when he started making short films in 1962. He actually was part of an Academy Award-winning short in 1970, The Resurrection of Bronco Billy. He's a part of that. He wasn't the director, but I think he's one of the writers or like an assistant on it. Excuse me. He also formed a band during the 70s called the Coupe de Villes with Tommy Lee Wallace and Nick Castle, who both will go on to be integral parts of his films. Since the 70s, he's basically had numerous roles in the film industry: writer, actor, composer, producer, and of course, director. After directing Dark Star in 1974, he helmed a lot of horror movie classics, many of which we're going to be talking about today, like Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, and then of course sci-fi tales like Escape from New York, Escape from LA, and Starman. Now he's been married twice. His first wife was Adrienne Barbeau, the great Adrienne Barbeau, though.
Yeah.
That's to you, Adrienne Barbeau. He actually met her on the set of a TV movie they did in the 70s called Someone Is Watching Me. They were married from 1979 to 1984. They had one child together who was actually named John Carpenter Jr., but his nickname is Cody. So just to kind of avoid confusion. And of course, she's done a number of movies with John Carpenter. She was in The Fog and of course Escape from New York. His second wife, Sandy King, is his current wife, and they've been married since 1990 to now. She's basically produced most of his later movies, like In the Mouth of Darkness, Village of the Damned, Vampires, Ghosts of Mars. And she's also script supervisor on like some of his earlier films, like Starman and stuff like that. In terms of some facts about Mr. Carpenter himself, he actually has certain trademarks that he associates with his films. Like number one, he does a lot of horror films, like I said before. Number two, he also tends to do the attribution where he will put his name at the head of whatever movie it's in. So John Carpenter's Halloween, John Carpenter's Escape from New York, John Carpenter's Christine, etc., etc. Also, composing. He does most of the soundtracks of his movies himself, which makes him very unique among Hollywood directors because the fact he not only does the directing, he also does the music.
I mean, the only time you really see that from him is going to be indie films.
Yeah. So yeah, most of his scores are synthesizer or piano based, and yeah, they sound great. Sound just as good as any other composer out there. Yeah, so that's another interesting thing he does. Also, he loves to do cheap scares, which you'll see his movie. Even his like sci-fi movies. I was actually watching Escape from New York this morning, and like there's one part where Snake is in the World Trade Center just getting his gun together, and just some dude just runs across on the back. It had nothing to do with the scene. Just some dude just ran across.
Just a stinger.
Just a cheap scare, man, and it works though. He also does a lot of apocalyptic type themes like The Thing and Prince of Darkness and, In the Mouth of Madness and, of course, Escape from New York and Escape from LA. A lot of those movies are, can be seen as apocalyptic, and, that the future is not going to be great, or maybe there's going to be some event that's going to lead to the end of the world, things of that nature. He does that a lot. So, yeah. And also in terms of,
You know, one other quick note as far as things that he likes to do. He's appeared in a number of his own films, but he goes under the name Rip Hate,
Yeah,
HaghT. So
yeah,
I mean, he's one of those directors, sort of like an Orson Welles or Hitchcock. Actually, Hitchcock probably more, where he just has these little cameos just for the hell of it. It's like an Easter egg.
yeah. And sometimes the actual cameos themselves might be just him on screen or
Yep.
just his voice.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, and he also references a lot of the works of Alfred Hitchcock. Since we talked about Hitchcock, he often films a lot of scenes in like single confined locations, so you don't really see a lot of jumping around in like John Carpenter movies. Uh, yeah, and actually, I want to go ahead and get into some of the trivia of Mr. Carpenter. Those are a lot of
Can I give
trademarks.
you one more quick one before we jump? Just something else
Go
that's
for
kind
it.
of funny about him.
Go for it.
So a lot of directors, you'll see them when they're on set. They'll be wearing a hat or a T-shirt or a jacket or something that's got their show's name on it, whatever it is they're making. He
Hmm.
considers that bad luck, so he won't wear any hats or anything with the name of his show till after it's wrapped, post is done, it's been delivered. At that point, then he's proud to wear it. So
Yeah,
kind of funny.
yeah.
He's got a little bit of a superstitious angle to him, especially considering all the horror movies he does.
I dig that, man.
Yeah.
Also, he is an atheist, and he has a distinct love for Elvis Presley and old Cadillacs. You see a lot of Cadillacs in his movies, especially though, like I said, Escape from New York. The Duke had a Cadillac with the chandeliers on the shit. Yeah, and he's a major NBA fan, and also has a satellite dish whenever he's on location, so he can keep up with all the games. He also keeps a portable basketball hoop for a location. Uh, like I said, he also is a big fan of Sergio Leone films. So like, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, Good, Bad, and the Ugly. He loves those type of movies. I do too.
Oh, for sure.
And like, and also one of the reasons he picked Lee Von Cleef for Escape from New York is because of the fact that Lee Von Cleef was usually the bad guy in a lot of those Sergio Leone movies, particularly the ones with Clint Eastwood. And like, yeah, so it just seems perfect for him to bring that in. Let's see here. Pass on that. Roughing on my notes.
Well, I got
With the exception of
I'm sorry.
what
Cut for a second.
what interrupt me again. What
I like
interrupt
it.
me again. Interrupt me again. Interrupt me again.
We can't do nothing.
Interrupt me again.
Out of the way.
Interrupt me again. You were saying?
No, I was just gonna say I've got a list, but I don't want to steal your thunder of
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. Since you want
crazy
to talk.
films that he turned down the chance to direct. So I just don't. I was gonna ask if you were gonna get into that later because I don't want to.
I actually was about to get in. I actually am going to get into
So I'm
it a
gonna let
little
you
later.
do that one.
So just save that.
All right. Hookers love direct.
Shall I continue?
Please.
Okay, I was gonna say, with the exception of Escape from LA, he rarely does a sequel to any of his films. He said he actually was forced into writing Halloween 2, but he refused to direct it because he didn't want he didn't want to direct the same movie again. So
Makes sense.
that does make sense. He's a big fan of the Beach Boys and Howard Hawks films. He's an avid Godzilla fan, and he also considers the very first Godzilla film from 1954 as a huge inspiration on him and his career. He was actually approached to score Planet Terror by Robert Rodriguez from Grindhouse, but he was actually busy making an episode of Masters of Horror on Showtime. His close friend, of course, of Jeff Bridges and Kurt Russell. Lives in West Hollywood. He's very open about that. He actually directed both two sisters in movies, Kim Richards in Assault from Precinct 13, the original, and Kyle Richards, who most people will know now from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She's actually the little girl, I think Lindsay or whatever her name is in Hollywood. I think the little girl's like Lindsay. She's like watching TV, whatever. Like that's Kyle Richards.
Okay.
That's Kyle Richards' girl. So he often claims that the Western is actually his favorite film genre, but he's never actually made a Western. But he makes a lot of references to Westerns in his movies. I don't know why he's never made a Western.
I mean, to be honest, his time frame when he actually finally came to prominence and could do what he wanted, Western really kind of died out as a genre. I mean, you had Unforgiven popped up for a second, then a couple little piddly things. Then you had Tombstone popped up for a second, a couple little piddly things, and then honestly, the last great Western I can think of is probably The Proposition. Everything else that's come out that's a Western is kind of like, it's just not there. It's a bygone era, really. But you could also make the argument that Escape from LA and Escape from New York are Westerns. They're just sci-fi Westerns.
Yeah. But yeah, Snake Plissken is definitely a Western character.
100%.
I can see him in a Western. Now, he named his 6 favorite movies of all time. They are Only Angels Have Wings from 1939, Rio Bravo from 1959,
Yep.
Citizen Kane from 1941, Vertigo from 1958, Black Christmas from 1974, and Blowout from 1966. Those are his favorite movies.
Blowout?
Blowout.
I don't think I know Blowout. I was thinking Blow Up.
No. Oh, was it Blow? Yeah, it's Blow. You are right. Blow Up.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm thinking Blowout. I'm thinking there's another one, Blowout, with what's his name? I think that was a Brian De Palma movie with Travolta. I think that was.
Okay. Yeah. I think I know the one you're talking about. I can't remember if that was Blowout or not, but Blow Up seems to be the one that all the film guys go to. Got to be honest, not my top 10. I get why people like it. It's not for me.
Gotcha. He claims his son Cody actually got him hooked on to playing video games. When Cody was a little kid, they would spend a lot of time together playing them. Apparently, an early favorite between the two was Sonic the Hedgehog. As an avid gamer, he actually continues to play games with his son now. As of 2013, his recent favorites are Dishonored, Assassin's Creed 3, and the God of War series. And he's frequently seen at the E3 convention with his son. So yeah, apparently John Carpenter is a big gamer.
All right,
well, cool. I think it's pretty cool actually. He also is he actually holds a commercial pilot's license. He can actually fly helicopters. Cool. He usually has shots in his movie, usually from the back of a character as they walk away from camera. He does in a lot of his movies, and he's known to be very comfortable with filmmakers and other people doing sequels and remakes of his movies. But he admits he's actually indifferent towards them, and usually gets involved with such projects for the money. So at least he's honest about that. Yeah. Now, since we talked about Miss Gigs, I got a few. Why don't you go ahead and start it off, since you were so anxious on doing that?
What that I was anxious. I was just checking because I know I can tend to trip over you from time to time, so I'm trying not to do that too much.
Well, no, you know what? Yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. You know what I'm saying? You want to talk? Talk.
All right. So just off the top of the list here, and this might have actually saved this movie. He turned down the Mutant Chronicles in 2008. That could have been maybe a little something different. He turned down the chance to work with Eddie Murphy in The Golden Child in '86. In '86, he also turned down Top Gun. In '87, he turned down Fatal Attraction. In '86, he also turned down Armed and Dangerous. And let's see here, what was the next one I got? He also, and that's the job that actually ended up going over to Lester, who directed, to Mark L. Lester, who directed Firestarter in '84.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
now, going back real quick.
I was going to say 2009, he turned down Zombieland.
Yeah. But I was going to say, going back to Fatal Attraction a little bit, as to why he turned it down, because the fact he saw the script and he said it was basically Play Misty for me, which it is.
Yeah.
Right. Play Misty for me is the granddaddy of all those, stalker type movies or whatever, Clint Eastwood and what's her name, Jessica Walter back in the 70s. I watched Play Misty for me. Yeah, I can see why he didn't want to do that. Like, I'm not going to rip off Clint Eastwood. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, but on the other hand, one thing I had a great directing teacher told us once, if you copy somebody's script, it's plagiarism. But if you essentially make somebody else's movie, if you copy some of the shots and stuff like that, it's an homage. So he could have done an homage to Play Misty for me, and it probably would have worked. But again, you got to respect the man and his sensibility that he's like, nah, I want to do something original.
Yeah. And at one point, he was actually attached to doing a remake of The Creature of the Black Lagoon for Universal.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
And Rick Baker was also attached to do the monster. So but it never got greenlit for some reason. But yeah, like had they did it,
Apparently, people who were working at Universal didn't know what they were doing because holy shit, that would have been awesome.
just me saying that out loud, like that,
I
dude,
know.
that's a movie. Let's do that.
That's a franchise.
Yeah, John Carpenter, Rick Baker, dude, let's do this right now. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, tell me what the budget is. You're greenlit. $35 million. Let's go.
let's go. All right, now we go ahead and got into his missed gigs. Now let's go into his actual movies themselves.
Right.
First one I want to do, Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
The one that really broke out, John Carpenter. You know
Put him on the map.
And put him on the map, man.
And
now,
Jamie Curtis, put her on the map.
Yep, I'm going to get to that too. Now, based on the actual character, Michael Myers is actually based on a 13-year-old kid that he saw at a mental institution when he was on a school trip in college. Like he was apparently touring like some psychiatric ward. He saw this one kid, and this one kid was just staring at him. And he said the kid had a look of evil, and it terrified him. And that was the kid's name, Michael Myers. So took that with him, and of course attributed to this killer character. Now, the original name of the script for Halloween was called The Babysitter Murders.
Halloween.
And the events of the movie, yeah, Halloween's better. Yeah, and the events of the movie was supposed to take place over several days, but for budgetary reasons, they made sure that everything was pretty much condensed down to one day. And also, it helps with the movie. Like, I always love those like one day in the life of a person type movies. You know what I'm saying? Where a whole bunch of crazy shit just happens in one fucking day.
Well, if it's spread out over the course of the movie, there's so many opportunities for them to get away, to get help, to go somewhere and find themselves somewhere. Like, again, we can fall down a rabbit hole on that one, but it makes total sense to put it all in one night, and it definitely ups the ante, right?
Yes, it does. And also, he picked Halloween because it's traditionally the scariest night of the year, so it'd be the perfect time for this kind of thing to happen. So, now, in the interview, the producer, Mustafa Akkad, said that John Carpenter actually envisioned making the movie around $300,000, but Akkad himself said that he was producing and filming another major motion picture at the time with Laurence Olivier, which was costing him around $300,000 a day. So when John Carpenter told him he wanted to do it at $3,000, the whole movie at $300,000, like, got it, you're in, yeah. Now, with the budget of $300,000, the movie went on to gross over $47 million at the box office, and basically equivalent to at least even equivalent to $2008. That's about $150 million.
Yeah, and again, like $1 million, $1.5 million, like it's insane.
Exactly, and of course that makes Halloween one of the most successful independent movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
The average age span of both cast and crew for Halloween was 26 years old. That's the average age. Everybody was like babies making this movie.
And they did a great job.
They did a fantastic job. Yeah. Now, for the score itself, John Carpenter completed the score of the famous Halloween theme. That shit, he did it in 4 days.
It's not bad.
Not bad at all. Now,
are you doing that because the score was hot, or is there something else happening over there?
Because there's a fucking bug in my face. I'm outside, folks, as you can see. So
you don't want to get kicked out of your place for smoking inside.
Exactly. So you could probably hear like wind chimes and goddamn dogs barking in my particular version because of the fact I'm outside. There it is.
I'm outside too, so you get the flyover.
Yeah, I got a couple of those too. Now, dark lighting in the movie, that was actually came out of necessity because of the fact they didn't have enough money for lights.
The other thing you got to give it, just before we move on from that, because there's a lot of night shots in there, and people who don't follow on don't necessarily know or understand. It's absolutely crazy difficult, especially with the film emulsion that when they were shooting in the 70s. It's crazy difficult to capture stuff in low light, and they did a fantastic job. Because I'm thinking about, was it the third Dirty Harry where there's that scene where he goes inside the building and he's fighting that guy inside and it's super dark? Is it the third one?
Yeah, it was Sudden Impact.
Yeah, when in Sudden Impact, when he's in there and he's fighting that guy in the dark and you can't see what the hell's going on, even in a pitch black room. It's because you can't. I mean, you have to have that contrast of light in order for it to be captured on film emulsion. So when you watch Halloween and you realize not only did they not have the money for it, but all of the night shots, they did a killer job of actually still making so you can see what the hell's happening. I mean, that in and of itself is a filmmaking feat that you got to give them. Again, 26-year-old kids doing this shit.
Yeah, man.
Fantastic work on their part.
Now, the producer of the film was Deborah Hill. She worked for no salary and a percentage of the profits. Since the movie grossed well over $70 million, it turned out very well for Deborah Hill. John Carpenter himself was only paid $10,000 to write, direct, and score this movie. Also, because of the fact the movie was made during the springtime, they had a hard time procuring pumpkins for the Halloween, scenes. So, now Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, interesting enough, they were a couple at the time, and also business partners. Now they were working on the movie together as a couple. They actually broke up a year later. Jamie Lee Curtis has said in movies that John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were her horror movie parents, and she was actually sad when they broke up. So, yeah. The film itself actually takes place based on Halloween night, October 1963, and also Halloween night, 1978. So, yeah.
They got to jump between.
Go ahead.
I said they have to jump between 2 Halloween nights to make it work.
Yeah. And Carpenter hired Jamie Lee Curtis mainly as a homage to Psycho and more or less Hitchcock, because of the fact that, the unknown fact, Jamie Lee Curtis's mother is Janet Leigh, the lady from Psycho. The chick in the shower screaming, that's Janet Leigh. That's Jamie Lee Curtis's mom.
Family business. Getting killed by psychos.
Oh my God. That is the family business, man. Now, both John Carpenter and Deborah Hill both have stated several times that they did not intend for the whole depicting virginity as a way of defeating a rampage and killer trope. They weren't intending to do that. They said the reason that all the horny teens died is simply because they're so preoccupied with getting laid that they're not noticing this killer at large. On the other hand, Lori is spending a lot of time on her own or with little kids, and she's therefore a lot more alert than the other ones that died.
Situational awareness, man.
It just happened to be like that. Situational awareness. Now, as far as the mask, go ahead.
Sorry, we had an internet lag. I just said it makes it or breaks it. Situational awareness.
Okay. Now, as I was saying, as far as the mask goes, there were actually 2 choices for masks. The first one was actually a Don Post Emmett Kelly smiling clown mask with like frizzy hair and shit. They thought it would look creepy, kind of like the mask that the little Michael wears when he kills his sister Judith at the beginning of the movie, like that. But it's like they tested it out and it was like, it's all right. The other mask was a 1975 James T. Kirk mask from Star Trek that was purchased for around $1. They basically had these sideburns and the eyebrows ripped off. They painted it what they call fish belly white. And more or less they cut out, the eyes and all the shit. They spray painted the hair brown and they opened up the eyes or whatever. They tested the Kirk mask and everybody's like, you know what, that's way creepier. Because the fact he's emotionless. I was like, let's go with that. And that became the Michael Myers mask. It's a Captain Kirk, a white painted Captain Kirk mask. Fantastic. And over the years, if you watch the Halloween movies, they make the mask even less pronounced in terms of making it look like William Shatner.
Yeah.
So, because apparently William Shatner hates the fact that they use a mask of him for this killer.
Well, first of all, the mask back then didn't look that much like him, number one. And number two, by the time they got done processing it, it looked nothing like him at all.
No, actually, my thing is, like, if you look at the first Halloween and look at certain scenes, like the one scene where you really see a lot of the Shatner is that when he kills the girl that was on the phone, and then he picks up the phone and puts it to his ear and starts breathing, like, you very much see the Shatner, like the cheekbones.
I'll have to watch it again. I don't recall ever seeing Shatner. I mean, I knew about it, but I don't know.
You very much see Shatner. I'm just saying. Okay. Now, since I mentioned it before, the Halloween theme, which I love, by the way. It's such a good and simple theme song for anything. So I really love the Halloween theme. Now, it was performed and composed by John Carpenter himself. If you wear 4/5 time signature, apparently he learned this rhythm from his dad, who again was a music professor.
Mm-hmm.
He admitted that he was inspired by the music from Dario Argento's Suspiria, I believe that's the name of the movie. And one of them Dario Argento movies, like them crazy, like Italian horror movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those movies. And also the music from The Exorcist. That was a big
definitely can hear some of that in there for sure.
I always love the Exorcist thing. Now, in addition to because of the film's critical and commercial success, the Halloween theme has become as recognizable as the movie itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, and pretty much he said, like, in terms of how he does music, John Carpenter, he said, I could play just about any keyboard, but I can't read or write a lick. So,
pretty successful.
Yeah, he can't write. Yeah, he can't read or write music, but he can play any keyboard.
Well, but I mean, that's like that old school way of learning music where you learn it all by rote. It's all by ear. I mean, that's honestly, that's how I am with any of the instruments that I play. I maybe can kind of sort of, if you give me like 20 minutes, figure out what the music says. But right. I got no clue. So, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Now, in this particular movie, he credits himself as the Bowling Green Philharmonic Orchestra. And Bowling Green, of course, is a reference to his hometown in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
That's hilarious.
So, that's cool. Now, Jamie Lee Curtis was so disappointed in her performance, she thought she was going to be fired after the first day. But she got a call from John. She's like, no, we love what you're doing. You're cool. You congratulated her, put her at ease. Like, I'm very happy with the way things are going. But she was very nervous throughout the filming of this movie. Now, John Carpenter himself actually approached both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play Dr. Loomis. Christopher Lee actually passed on it, and he said it's probably the single biggest mistake he's ever made in his career. I think it would have been cool to see Christopher Lee as Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
You agree?
Oh, 100%.
All right, cool. Yeah. All right. All right. Now, Donald Pleasance himself, who did play Dr. Loomis, was actually the oldest and most experienced person on the crew of this entire movie. And he actually said why he did the movie. He's like, I don't know why. This is Donald Pleasance talking. I don't know why I'm in this movie, and I don't know who my character is. The only reason I'm doing this is because I have alimony to pay, and my daughter's in England, and she's in this rock and roll group, and she said she loved the music from Assault on Precinct 13. That's how I came to know you, etc., etc. But then, of course, Donald was a little difficult, apparently, according to John, but they've since have become great friends, apparently. And Donald Pleasance were going to do 2 other Carpenter movies, so.
Well, I mean, that's one of those things that you hear all the time when it comes to young directors or more inexperienced directors working with veteran actors, right? I mean, that pops up all the time. In fact, what was it in Stripes, right? We were talking about that before.
Yeah, with Warren Oates.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where they end up, they butt heads because obviously one's got that different level of professionalism. The other one's still figuring out, honestly, they're trying to figure out what their style is.
Yeah. Now, the actors themselves actually wore their own clothes throughout the movie. In fact, Jamie Lee Curtis actually went to a JCPenney and picked out all of Laurie's clothes. She said she spent like less than $100 on everything.
That's basically like a student film.
Yeah. Now, PJ Souls.
This color.
Yeah. PJ Souls, who also plays Laurie in the movie. She plays Linda. I'm sorry. She's the one who works out the boobs and she gets killed by Michael. She's the girl, the phone girl. She's the one that gets killed by the phone. Yeah. She went to go see the movie with a regular audience, and when she did her nude scene where she's like pops up, she's like, "See anything you like?" And some guy in the theater was like, "Hell yeah, dude!" But apparently she was there with her. She was there in the theater with her boyfriend Dennis Quaid. So Dennis didn't appreciate that, but she was amused by it. But Dennis didn't appreciate that. So that's a crazy story. So you better get your ass whooped by Dennis Quaid because you're talking about his girlfriend flashing her titties in the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, like you gotta, if you're gonna date an actress who's gonna get nude on screen, like you gotta expect somebody's gonna say or do something like that. I mean, if you
Yeah,
bother, then don't date somebody who's gonna do that.
you're watching a horror movie. You're both actors. Why are you tripping?
Yeah, I mean, like if she was like I don't know, like if she was a police officer or something, like somebody who wasn't at all involved in the business, then I'd be like, okay, I understand it. But I mean, like first of all, I'm not a fan of that, which is why
Mhm.
I didn't date or marry anyone who's an actress. I mean, that's just not. I get it, but
Yeah,
come on, man, you're an actor. You should understand that.
yeah, I get that. Now Deborah Hill, since we're talking about that, Deborah Hill actually wrote most of most of, if not all, the female dialogue, whereas John Carpenter concentrated on all the stuff from Dr. Loomis. So
All right.
yeah,
Yeah.
female touch, man. As you mentioned earlier, this is Jamie Lee Curtis's very first feature film, and apparently she was on the show Petticoat Junction at the time,
Okay.
and she took and apparently it was like between seasons, and she did that. She filmed this movie between seasons. Apparently, she was only paid $8,000 for the entire movie.
How much?
8,000.
8,000 or 80?
8,000.
Okay. I was gonna be like, damn, she made more than John did for writing.
No,
directing.
just $8,000. Yep. Now, the movie, and funny enough, the movie that the little boy Tommy and Lori are watching, is The Thing from Another World, which will be remade a couple years later by John Carpenter as The Thing, which we're gonna go talk to a little bit later.
Mhm.
I just love that the fact that they had the original in that movie. I thought that was cool. Nice
Well,
little
it shows
touch.
he's been a longtime fan.
Yeah. Now, the main person in the mask, who they referred to as the Shape, was a dude named Nick Castle, who was going to be director himself. Now, Nick Castle's direction from John Carpenter was very minimal. I think the main thing he would do, like particularly the one scene where he kills like some boyfriend or whatever,
Mhm.
and like it comes out the kitchen, strings this dude up, stabs him in the chest, and leaves him hanging on the wall.
Mhm.
The whole thing where he's like leaning his head over and just kind of examining him. That's John Carpenter stuff. Just not very little. Like, just look at it. And the whole thing of him, when he gets killed, he just pops back up. Looking at shit. Same thing, John Carpenter. And God knows how many goddamn horror movie characters have copied that since.
Oh, sure.
Like Jason did it. Who else? I think like Maniac Cop did it. Like a bunch of people do it. So
Well,
you kind of set up the whole look. Yeah.
there's two ways. There's two ways to look at a monster or a killer in a horror movie. You either have like the frenzy killer, like we get into like Wes Craven, right? You talk about like Freddy Krueger. He's sprinting after you and he's gonna get you. Or they're just slow and methodical and they're taking their time. And then once they killed you, they've just kind of got that sick fascination going on with, oh, look what's happening to you. It's that, or
Yeah.
they're like rage-induced zombies coming to murder you. There's not a lot of between.
Yeah. So apparently Laurie Strode, the character, was actually named after John Carpenter's very first girlfriend. Hey, that's what it is. Also, Siskel and Ebert, before they kind of got big as film critics, they actually talked about like their scariest movies or whatever they've ever seen. And actually, Gene Siskel actually remarked that Halloween was probably the scariest movie he'd ever seen. So much so that he said he went and saw it at a local theater. He was so scared he took a cab home, and even though he lived 2 blocks from the theater, he took a cab home. And when he got to the house, he went to a shower and checked his curtains, and then apparently it really freaked out Gene Siskel.
All right, so as long as we're talking about scary movies, just as a quick aside, what is the scariest film you've ever seen? What ones made you turn on the lights? As an adult, not as a kid, as an adult.
Probably Audition. That Japanese movie I told you about.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. Did you ever see Quarantine?
Yeah, I saw Quarantine. I don't know what you're talking about, but like, look, I like Audition because of the fact it was like real, like body horror. Like, like this Japanese girl is doing these ungodly things to this guy. He can't do anything about it. He deserves it. He's an asshole. But at the same time, it's like, Jesus Christ, he can't do anything. She's like sawing off his like bones and shit with like piano wires slowly.
Ugh.
And like he can't like he's awake, but he's like sedated to the point where he can't do anything physically to stop her. So it's like he feels everything, but he can't do anything. It's so awful.
Quarantine's a great film, but it's that end sequence in night vision on that camera.
Yeah.
That's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen put to film. I was probably like 21, 22 when I saw it. I
Yeah.
literally
I was
had to
like,
go watch the behind the scenes because I was turning lights on and shit at night, walking downstairs. Because I mean, it was the acting, the direction, the cut, everything. It's
yeah.
absolutely terrifying. And right now, since we're all quarantined, it's a great time to watch that movie and then stay at home and freak.
Yeah, it's the perfect movie to watch when actually in quarantine. Yeah.
Yeah, because the CDC is
Uh,
quarantined us all. That's the whole point of the movies. If you've never seen the film, this
Yeah.
lady's going on a ride along with the fire department in LA. They go to the
Yeah.
stop, and it's a medical call inside an apartment building. They go
Mhm.
inside, and there's this weird virus essentially that's kind of infecting everyone in there. The CDC shows up, quarantines the building, and if you try to get out, they shoot you and gun you down, so you can't get out with the virus. But this virus is like destroying people inside. So it's a killer.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's actually a remake of a French film called Record. REC.
Yeah. There's a couple other movies that used to scare the shit out of me when I was younger. Like of course the aforementioned Killer Clowns from Outer Space fucked me up. The original It fucked me up. There's a movie actually made by Trauma called Death by Temptation, DEF, like Def Comedy Jam by Temptation. It was a black horror movie, basically like with this like vampire. It has like Kadeem Hardison in it, Sam Jackson's in it, like Bill Nunn, a couple other people, and it's like very gory and very disgusting, and like it really fucked me up. There's one particular scene that for the longest time I couldn't go near TV because of this particular scene. There's one scene where the Kadeem Hardison character is like going into a room. He's like doing like bullshit karate moves, talking about how badass he is and shit. TV turns on and it shows him doing the same shit he did entering the room, but him on the TV is talking to him. And it gets closer and closer and closer to the point where you see only the mouth on the TV screen. And Kadeem Hardison is just transfixed by this, this is me on TV, like he's so transfixed by it. And things like, yeah, come closer. And the TV, he touches the TV screen and then it bites down on his hand and basically just gobbles him up into the TV screen. And then you see the mouth. Once the body is gobbled up, you see the mouth doing like this, like, and then it spits out all his guts and entrails and shit. And it fucked me up. I was like, no.
That's a great trauma.
Yeah, trauma. It's very trauma. Yeah, very trauma, dude. It's like so gross stuff.
So yeah, I would have.
What's another one? Say that again.
I said I would have been scared of chuds.
Chud. Oh,
Yeah.
you talk Chud? Yeah. I see. I'm scared of parts of Chud. But overall, like once I started watching, I was like, yeah, this is whatever.
If
But
you've
yeah.
never seen trauma films, check them out. Talk about like some crazy ass B movies.
Oh my God, they are so blatantly gross and disrespectful. They ain't funny. It's like you watch these movies, it's like, how the fuck did this get made?
Well,
Like,
what's
it's so
crazy, they're still making this shit.
yeah, I know they still are. And like they're blatantly racist. They're blatantly just like misogynist. Like you know what I'm saying? There's a whole bunch of body horror. Like people are constantly getting stabbed. You see there's one scene in like the Toxic Avenger where they actually run down a child and like fucking like there's a little kid like riding a bicycle, and like they some teenagers like fucking run him over initially. He's on the ground squirming, trying to get for help. They run him over again and run over his head. His brains and shit is splattered. They come out and start taking pictures of the shit. It's so disgusting.
There's some weird shit out there, but I gotta say, like, that's the weird thing. I haven't seen any movies that I can recall for a long time where I actually got scared of anything, save for quarantine. Honestly, like most of the films, because like they all follow a similar enough pattern, right? And a lot of it is very similar, based off the Halloween trope, right? In terms of the way that you're supposed to progress with. You set the stage. Here's just a little bit more of the mystical history of who or whatever the creature is that's going to come after you. Then the creature's chasing you, and then it kills everyone except for one person who gets away to tell the story, essentially.
Of course.
And so, like, because of that, it's so cinematic, I guess, that it doesn't really get me. But what's crazy about Record is, and Quarantine is it's found footage. So it looks like you're reviewing actual footage, and it still manages to stay with the narrative. But the biggest problem I had with Cloverfield was it was so jerky, right? Because they have it so it's done essentially amateur. So you've got amateurs that are running the camera, so it's all jerky and swinging it. I get freaking motion sickness watching that one. But record, because it's a professional cameraman who's going through, ostensibly in the storyline. That's what makes it terrifying, because the suspension of disbelief is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah. Now, real quick, back to we talked about earlier how Shatner hated the whole thing of them using his mask. Also, Mike Myers from SNL. He hated the fact that he was a kid when Halloween came out, and they say all these kids are fucking with him because of the fact he has the same name of this killer.
What about the Mike Myers mental institution? That poor kid, it's literally based on him.
Yeah, true.
How the insurance passed on that, I have no idea.
True.
That's errors and omissions for people who aren't in the business. Because normally, if you can tie something back to somebody specifically, the lawyer's like, nah, we don't want to risk getting sued.
Yeah. Now, in terms of like Michael Myers movements, again, we talked about Nick Castle getting minimal direction. John Carpenter actually mentioned that he based Michael Myers' movements on the Yul Brynner character in Westworld, the original Westworld.
Oh yeah.
So the robot that he was playing, he based a lot of Michael Myers on that character. Also, in terms of the cameo that we talked about, John Carpenter making a cameo in the movie, Annie's boyfriend Paul, the voice that you hear on the phone, that's John Carpenter.
More than one way to cameo.
He was Annie's boyfriend. Now, in terms of the overall scope of the movie, Halloween is a highly influential film in the horror genre. It's largely responsible for the popularization of slasher films, particularly in the 80s and even to now. And he basically helped develop the slasher genre. It's not the first slasher movie. Black Christmas came out before it, and also Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out before it.
Yeah.
But it's really Halloween is really what established the common tropes that you see in those type of movies. So they popularized the final girl trope. There's always like the one last girl at the end, killing off all the other characters that are substance abusers and like sexually promiscuous, and also having a very unique theme song for the killer. And also doing a lot of scenes from the killer's perspective. They also stole that from John Carpenter. So they also, basically it became the blueprint of success for like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, and then so many other like horror, like holiday-based like slasher movies. What's the other one? Silent Night, Deadly Night, our holiday shit. Huh?
Leprechaun.
Yeah. I think there's one called April the 13th or something. April Fool's Day. Yeah, April Fool's Day is one. What was the other one? There's so many stupid ones, and then of course, what's the other shit? Oh yeah, but yeah, just Friday the 13th, April Fool's Day, all those crazy shits, or whatever. They're trying to have some kind of damn killer. Yeah, these fucking flies are killing me right now. Like, you know my nerves.
I know, I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm just swatting and shit, and I'm trying to speak, trying to explain. Thank you, friend.
We're gonna start doing 3 snaps in the Z formation. It's gonna turn into a in living color bit.
Damn near shit. Now, in terms of like its ranking and different things, now Halloween was actually ranked number 68 by AFI's 100 Years, 100 Screams. It's ranked number 14 on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. The Chicago Film Critics Association named it the third scariest movie ever made in 2006. In 2008, Empire Magazine selected it among the 500 greatest movies of all time. In 2010, Total Film picked it upon its 100 greatest movies of all time. In 2017, and also in 2018 for Complex and Pace Magazine, Halloween was named the best slasher film of all time. And lastly, Michael Myers himself was ranked the greatest slasher villain of all time by LA Weekly. So, yeah. And also, more importantly, the movie was selected in 2006 by the Library of Congress for film preservation.
There you go.
Yeah. Preserved for all time, Halloween. Yeah. Now, next movie we're talking about, Escape from New York.
Which would be really nice to do right now.
That is my personal favorite of John Carpenter's films. Again, I watched it this morning before we even did this podcast, and I'm very, very happy that we both agreed that we were going to take a look at this movie and shit. Now, John Carpenter himself first wrote the screenplay for Escape from New York in 1976 as a reaction to Watergate. You know, and initially the studios thought it was too dark and too violent, but that changed after Halloween. He could pretty much write his own little ticket after that. He also cited the Harry Harrison sci-fi novel Planet of the Damned as a large inspiration for this movie, because of the fact that movie, that novel follows a dude named Brian Brand, who leaves a planet and is deserted on this desert planet called Dis in a mission to prevent a global Holocaust. And this guy basically has no choice but to do this job for the government. That's basically the whole premise of Snake Plissken in this movie. He had no choice but to do this thing for the government. Now, he also was inspired by Death Wish, the original Death Wish, Charles Bronson. He said he didn't agree with the movie's philosophy, but he did like the whole conveying New York as sort of like this jungle. And he wanted to do add a sci-fi edge to that. Now, the studio executives, because the fact they mentioned Death Wish, they wanted Charles Bronson to play Snake Plissken, but John Carpenter was like, no, he's way too old.
Nah, I wouldn't.
But, yeah. Also, another thing, one of those.
Too.
Say that again.
I said, and I like Charles Bronson too, but would have been a completely different film.
Definitely, yeah. The name actual Snake Plissken, again, came from a real person. Apparently, a friend of John Carpenter said he knew this guy in high school who was like sort of like the high school tough guy or whatever. And one thing was notable about him is that he had a large tattoo of a snake on his body. And hence he had the name Snake Plissken. And to Carpenter, he's like, anybody who's got a snake tattooed on him, that's my kind of hero.
There you go.
Snake Plissken was born. Now, both Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges were both approached to play Snake Plissken. They both turned it down. Also, Chris Christopherson was also a candidate for Snake Plissken, but they said no on that because he had just done Heaven's Gate. Such a huge failure.
Yeah.
It's like, no, can't do Chris Christopherson. Nah, not right now, anyway.
The worst part about when you do one screw up like that, they put you in timeout.
Exactly. Now, as far as the casting of Kurt Russell goes, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell had worked together before on a TV movie in 1979 called Elvis, where Kurt Russell played Elvis. I've seen little snippets of it. It's actually a pretty good little movie. So,
isn't bad.
So John Carpenter lobbied hard for Kurt Russell to play Snake Plissken. And also Kurt Russell himself pushed himself very hard because of the fact he wanted to shake his Disney image, because prior to this movie, he was most mainly known as a Disney kid. Yeah. And he did like 3 movies in the 70s, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, and The World's Strongest Man, which is my favorite of the 3. He's played this kid named Dexter Riley, who's always getting these like powers from different accidents and shit. And they were always temporary. And also he was always being pursued by this corrupt criminal named A.J. Arno, played by Cesar Romero. So I always like those.
He's chasing down Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell, man, yeah. And then, of course, the famous thing about him being a Disney kid, that supposedly Walt Disney's last words were Kurt Russell. And also that the last letter that Disney ever wrote was to Kurt Russell. So,
well, that's definitely something to carry with you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Lighten it up real quick, folks.
What goes out when you spend so much time talking,
Yeah, it does. Was that a joke? Was that a dig?
It wasn't a dig. I was just explaining to folks who might not smoke cigars. They don't know. You got to keep it going or you have to relight.
Okay. All right, man.
Don't be sensitive.
I'm just saying. That's pretty. There's some underlying shit there. I'm just saying.
Look,
all right, now.
At this point in time in our relationship, you can't even remotely be sensitive. Just let that shit go, man. Keep rolling.
All right, I'm letting it go. All right, fine. All right, Kurt Russell actually based Snake Plissken on a combination of different characters: Bruce Lee, Darth Vader, the Exterminator from the movie The Exterminator, and most notably Clint Eastwood, particularly with Snake's voice. Now, because of the fact that Snake is based on Clint Eastwood, the whole casting of Levon Cleef as a Hawk is also kind of like crazy. It's like, oh, this is a crazy coincidence. You know what I'm saying? So and it worked out well because every scene they did together, he did that, low Clint Eastwood type growl to Levon Cleef. And it worked very well. Now, shooting of the movie began in late 1980 with a $7 million budget, which at the time was the largest budget that John Carpenter had ever worked with. And the shooting schedule, which lasted 3 months, was also the longest and most logistically complex. They employed a 180-person crew, fully union, which is also new for John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, because they used smaller crews that were either non-union or partially union. The eye patch for Snake Plissken is actually Kurt Russell's idea.
Yep.
Yeah. Kurt Russell has since stated that of all his characters and of all his films, this is his favorite character and his favorite movie, Snake Plissken and Escape from New York. It changed his career. It really did. If you look at it. Before that, like I said, before that he was a Disney kid. After that, now he's a leading man.
Probably to put it in modern terms for people in our demo a little more, it was like when Matt Damon finally went out and did The Bourne Identity, completely shifted his persona.
Or another one, Chris Pratt, when he went from Parks and Rec to Guardians of the Galaxy. Same thing.
Although I think I have to argue though that Guardians of the Galaxy was just like, instead of being Andy Dwyer, the lovable screw up, he was Andy Dwyer, but he actually gets his shit right. Because I mean, he doesn't, like, with what he did in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, he never really kind of shifted into that same kind of force to be reckoned with gruff demeanor. He's always kind of maintained that same lovable, fun, kind of comedic atmosphere about him. So that's the only reason I would go with the other ones, because you basically went from Matt Damon, who's kind of like, essentially he's kind of soft, like then talented Mr. Ripley, he done Good Will Hunting, those types of dramatic roles, to like suddenly he's like, he's a
Jason Bourne
assassin you don't want to mess with, and he'll kill you.
Yeah. And also, since we're talking about Chris Pratt, the whole thing, he actually said in interviews that part of his inspiration was Kurt Russell, particularly Kurt Russell in Big Trouble China. And also that, because of how inspired he was by Kurt Russell, that's why they cast Kurt Russell in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as his father, Peter Quill's father.
That must have been so awesome for him.
It just works, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, for Chris Pratt, that must have been awesome for him to get to work with Kurt in that role.
Russell, yeah, like, fuck yeah, Kurt Russell, man, yeah. Now, in terms of like different things, the look he wanted for this particular movie, he wanted two distinct looks. He wanted one to be a police state, very high tech, lots of neon. The United States dominated by underground computers, you know what I'm saying? And that was easy to shoot compared to the, Manhattan Island prison sequences that were, very few lights, mainly torch lights, and very pretty much like feudal England.
All those.
That's how I describe it. Mm-hmm. So, and also he said this is actually the first film that actually be shot on Liberty Island beneath the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. And you can actually see the shot of like a helicopter going across the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island. And apparently that is the only shot of New York in Escape from New York. Just that one shot of the helicopter going across the Statue of Liberty. And then you see there's a transition from there to like the prison facility that they have. And that's like somewhere else. That's basically the studio. But there's just that look, like I say, just the one shot of New York. Crazy.
Not too bad.
Not too bad at all. Yeah. And also, there's another helicopter shot in the movie too, where they're supposed to be flying over Central Park, but Central Park is like all like wooded out now. There's like no, trails and nothing like that. That was actually shot in San Fernando, California. Yes. And the main thing that was supposed to be in New York is basically East St. Louis. Yeah. Apparently some shit happened where there was like a fire, like in the 70s, and like most of those buildings around there were like basically condemned, and they're just sitting there laying there. And it's like, this looks kind of like New York, and it wouldn't cost nowhere near as much money. So let's just use that. And also, John Carpenter taught the people who did power there to knock out the power in a 10-block radius. So yeah.
He got
So you see, like,
did you see that thing about the bridge that he bought?
yeah, for $1.
For $1, they shot on it. The old Chain of Rocks bridge. Shot
Yeah,
it.
and then he
sold it back to him for $1 again.
for $1, yeah, for $1.
Literally, they just did that so that they could privatize it, so that they could do whatever the hell they wanted without getting in trouble and having to deal with permits. And then once they sold it back to him, like, okay, well, that was a nice legal workaround.
Yeah. So the movie itself was shot from August to November 1980. Now, John Carpenter himself said it was a very demanding shot on him. Say basically they would finish shooting at around 6 a.m. Then they go to bed around 7, and then that's when the sun will be coming up. Then they wake up around 5, 6 o'clock p.m. Depending on whether they had dailies or not. And then by the time they actually got going, or whether the sun is actually setting, so there's actually a 2.5 month period where he never saw daylight. So that is cool. Oh yeah, another cool thing, the computer graphics that they have in the movies in certain scenes, particularly and more prominently the gold wing, the gold fire flying scene over New York, where it has the computer screen or whatever. That actually was not 3D effects, despite what people were thinking. Basically, just a black model, and they put like this white bright tape on there, like on all the buildings and stuff, and they shot it a certain way, and that's why it looks like 3D and all this stuff. It's basically just a black model with tape on it, and they just ran a camera through it.
Well, and they also had some killer mats, because back then you were still shooting a lot of stuff with mats. If people don't know what that is, Google that real quick.
Look up matte paintings. Yeah,
and that's an artistry that's been basically lost, because now we go CGI, everything's just green screen, so they cut around it.
But look at old school movies where you see the background of a movie, it looks like it's painted. It's because it is painted. And in these particular mats, I believe, were done by the Corman Company, Roger Corman's company, one of which who did prominent work on this movie, James Cameron, who of course will go on to be the director of The Terminator and Avatar, and had the record for the highest grossing movie of all time for like 20 years until Avengers came along. But yeah, that's another story for another day.
Is that adjusted for inflation?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah, actually, yes. I'm just saying. Yeah. The opening narration and the computer voice in the prison complex is an uncredited Jamie Lee Curtis. So at the beginning of the movie, when she's talking about like the crime rate in America's gone up 400%, she's talking about like she's pretty much giving the whole layout of the movie in terms of like Manhattan Island is a prison now. Yeah. Now, I love the little ending line she does. Like, there are no guards there, just prisoners in the worlds they have created. There's only one rule: once you go in, you don't come out. Very simple and like very effective too. But yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is the narrator voice. I think she did it again for Escape from LA.
Yeah, I don't know that for sure. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, she wasn't credited for either one, so yeah.
I'm
pretty sure it's her. Yeah.
And again, she's got that long-term relationship with John, and that's the reason she has the career she has.
Yeah. Another fun fact: both John Carpenter and Kurt Russell work with their ex-wives in this movie. Because John Carpenter was married to Adrienne Barbeau, who plays Maggie, and Kurt Russell was married to Summer Hubley, who plays the girl in that chock full of nuts diner or whatever, before she gets eaten by the street crazies. Yeah, that was Kurt Russell's wife.
Must have been a hell of a shoot.
Oh my God, I'm sure it was. Kurt Russell actually said he actually found it necessary to remove the eye patch between scenes because of the fact he kept fucking with his depth perception. So,
I bet.
Yeah. Now the theme itself, again, composed by John Carpenter. The that shit, I love that theme song. Again,
which one of his songs do you hate?
Shit.
Trick question. You don't hate any of them.
No. I'll give you an answer. I wasn't crazy about the one for They Live.
For
To
which
be
one?
honest with you, but They Live.
Okay.
I wasn't crazy about that one because like I don't know. It's just like at certain times it seemed too happy for a John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So that's just me.
Although that is one of the crazier movies, but we'll get to that.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Now, basically, this movie was done on synthesizers with the help of Alan Howarth, who would go on to do a bunch of other Carpenter movies like They Live and Big Trouble in Little China and shit like that. Now, the use of synthesizers at this point was like kind of like weird because of the fact that mainly Hollywood was kind of an orchestral beast. You know what I'm saying? Like they use all orchestra stuff. Now, John Carpenter with the pulsing like bass things like like and all that shit or whatever. Like he kind of popularized the use of synthesizers in a lot of other movies, particularly action, horror, and sci-fi. There's a lot of synthesizers, particularly in the 80s. And
Well,
you
and
can
that's
see
from
how
the background, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's indie film background because, again, like you said, most everything else when you watch anything else from that time frame or even right after, it was still heavily orchestral, and that's because that was traditional Hollywood. That was studio Hollywood.
Yeah, and even now, it set the standard for like certain certain filmmakers who want to throw a little indie like a little retro charm on their movies. So they'll do the whole retro synthesizer thing, like the score for Drive, that movie, and also like what's this shit? It Follows.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a John Carpenter score right there for It Follows. Like check that out. Also, since we're talking about the influence of it, the video game director Hideo Kojima actually referenced the movie as an influence on his work, particularly the Metal Gear Solid series. And Solid Snake is based very clearly on Snake Plissken.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's a killer franchise. Billions.
very much a homage.
Not billions at this point because it's been around. They're like on what, like the 7th or 8th iteration of that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And oh yeah, one of my favorite things of the movie is that everybody, whenever they see Snake Plissken or talk to Snake Plissken, they're like, "I heard you were dead." That line, they actually borrowed that from the John Wayne movie, Big Jake, from 1971.
Oh yeah.
Same thing. Whenever he would say his name, someone like, "I thought you were dead." And also a weird fact: everybody who says "I thought you were dead" in this movie ends up dead.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Thought you were dead. Well, you are dead.
Your turn.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, your turn. Yeah. Now, one night when they was shooting in St. Louis, Kurt Russell apparently encountered some like local thugs, but he was dressed in the Snake Plissken costume with the eye patch and the gun. It was like, and they was like, okay, yeah, this is gonna work. This will be cool. So yeah, like, I don't want to fuck with him. Like, so. Yeah, it's funny that they actually worked though.
The only time I've heard something similar to that was it Ving Rhames, wasn't it? Oh, no, what was his name? Viggo Mortensen. He was in Eastern Promises. Remember, he's got all the tattoos like he's a Russian mobster. He had all that shit on.
The Russian guy.
He went to go sit down and have dinner at some Russian restaurant in London, and like everyone there was just like, oh shit, like big eyes, like watching him when he came in and sat down and everything. So he said when he left, he went back to talk with the makeup team and everyone. He's like, I think this works. Everybody's scared of me.
Yeah, because everybody's intimidated by it. I get that.
Yeah. I mean, especially like in those situations, like if you can run into essentially the same population that you're trying to emulate, and they're picking up on all the cues and everything, and they're going, okay, like this is somebody not to mess with, like Snake, like hanging out with like a bunch of thugs and stuff, and it scares them. Or Viggo dressed up as a Russian mobster, and he goes to a Russian diner, and Russian people are like, oh crap, we gotta watch out for that dude. That's when you know you're cooking with gas.
Yeah. Funny enough, there's also a little trademark in this movie. There's some minor characters in the movie named Cronenberg, Romero, Taylor. There's a nod from John Carpenter to some other directors like David Cronenberg, George A. Romero, etc., etc. Levon Cleef was apparently he only did like one day of shooting for this movie, which is crazy. All his scenes were done in like one day, and which is crazy when you think about it, because he's in a lot of scenes.
Yep.
But yeah, all this stuff was done in one day. And then apparently they had some issues because some of his close-ups were kind of blurry. They tried to get him back, they couldn't afford it. So they basically just did a couple scenes with a stand-in. But yeah, also during the scene, he actually had like some issues walking because he apparently had like this knee issue from a new movie he did years prior that never really healed up. Apparently, Ricardo Montalban had something similar, where like he got injured, and like you see like Ricardo has a certain like walk or whatever when he like is in the movies, and it's because of the fact he had this injury that he never got looked at because his work. So crazy. Trying to think of anything else here.
I mean, there's a lot of Carpenter specific, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, that's basically all the stuff I got for Escape from New York. You got anything else?
No, not that's not Carpenter specific. We could go into this movie for a while, but we still got other films to get to. We've only gotten through 2 so far, so we should keep rolling.
Yeah, got you. Okay. All right. So next one, The Thing. All right. This is one of my personal favorite horror movies, and also John Carpenter said of his movies, this is his personal favorite. So yeah. And it's also John Carpenter's first foray into major studio filmmaking. Now they've been attempting to do like apparently the story of The Thing for a couple of years or whatever, and do adaptations of the original story, Who Goes There. But no one ever really got to the point where they actually did like how the original was set up, like where it's like this like killer that can like assume different forms. They did the original, the main movie that everybody knows, The Thing from Another World, and it was basically just this giant Frankenstein monster. And while John Carpenter does love that movie, he's like, I want to do the original story, so that's what he went with. Now, the opening title, when they have the thing where they have the thing coming up and burning into the screen and whatnot. So what they did was they basically had an animation cell done with the Thing logo on it, and it was basically behind this giant fish tank with smoke in it. And they also covered the animation cell with this like plastic, like almost like a plastic bag or whatever. And so to get the proper effect, they also had the light in the back, or whatever. It was shown downward. So to get the proper effect, all he did was like lit the animation cell, the plastic bag around the animation cell, and that's what gives you the effect of it burning into the screen with the lights and all that shit. I always loved that intro too.
Yeah, it is a killer opening shot. Like we talked about setting the table, right? That puts you in a really disturbed frame of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also for this movie, John Carpenter wanted to do a different type of horror movie. He wanted to do a group of intelligent, well-read guys going up against this otherworldly creature, challenging everything they know, instead of going through the whole slasher trope where it's like this killer going up against a bunch of dumbass kids and shit. Yeah, so he really liked the idea, and also liked the isolation of a bunch of people being stuck together and the paranoia that comes with that, which is really prevalent in this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. This is also the first John Carpenter movie that he did not score himself. The movie score is actually done by Ennio Morricone, also another Sergio Leone alumni. And it almost sounds like it's like him attempting to do a John Carpenter theme, like the dum, 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 dum. It's all it is, really, just that repeating thing over and over. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
but it's very You didn't know that?
Sorry, you cut out.
You didn't know that? I said you didn't know that?
No, what?
That Ennio Morricone did the script. I thought that's what you said.
Oh, no. I know that, but I'm saying it makes sense that he has it sound so much like a John Carpenter score because you got to make sure the director likes what you're doing. So listen to his shit, emulate it, and then guess what? You hit a home run.
There you go. Now, the budget for this movie was actually $15 million, which was larger than most of the other horror movies at that point. Like the original Friday the 13th was like $700,000 to make. The original Halloween, of course, was $300,000 to make. So yeah, it's bigger budget. Also, the movie apparently the scene in the script that sold him in terms of making the movie is the blood test scene.
Hmm.
Where they're like sitting together, they're collecting all the blood in the petri dishes, and he's doing the thing with the that's like I'm making this movie.
Yeah.
So killer.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And also, they did most of the scenes were actually done on the refrigerated lots on Universal. And the funny thing enough was it was actually a heat wave in LA, of course, during that time frame. And one thing that Kurt Russell remembers when he first came to the first day of shooting was there was this big sign welcoming Dolly Parton and Burt Reynolds because they were filming the biggest little whorehouse in Texas in the same lot. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, but you're jumping over what was ridiculous about the refrigerated set they're on. So it's 100 degrees in LA. They kept the sets at 40 degrees to make sure it gave that good chilling effect, you know, get a little bit of the breath and all that kind of stuff going on. So what's insane is the electrical bill, even back then, through the freaking roof for this thing. Because normally, like, at most, if maybe you've got like an A-lister who, you know, they want stuff cool, like maybe they'll put, okay, it has to be 68 degrees or 70 degrees on stage, something like that. But 40 freaking degrees. And those, if you've never been on a sound stage before, 25, 30-foot ceilings, I mean, massive cubic footage that you have to keep freezing cold.
Yep.
It's insane.
Yeah. Now, while this is going on to be a great big cult favorite for a lot of people, it did not perform well when it was initially released, mainly because of the fact it went up against another alien movie, E.T., the extraterrestrial. So it wasn't winning against E.T., unfortunately. And actually, John Carpenter took the box office failing of this movie personally. Like he was really hurt by it. You know what I'm saying?
But I mean, you're going up against Spielberg, and you're going up against a family-friendly kind of version of that whole thing. Like, it's not even fair, honestly, to be at the box office at the same time. I mean, if people have decided they want to go with the friendly alien, the one that's come to town to make all of us, realize the better part of our nature, you can't put that up against something that's like literally an alien slasher film. It was just bad release time. They should have held it for another year.
Yeah, and since we talked about the Ennio Morricone score, funny enough, and we talked about this, I think, in another podcast. A lot of the unused music from The Thing here was actually used by Quentin Tarantino for Hateful Eight. And funny enough, it won Ennio Morricone the Oscar, his first Oscar. And like, I just love the irony that his very first Oscar in his long career was basically consistent of unused music that he used for a 1982 movie.
You know what? As long as you get it, you get it. Oh man, you froze again.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Can you see me?
Yeah, there you go.
Can you see me?
Yep, I got you.
All right, my eyes are fucked up. But yeah, okay. So, but yeah, actually, another thing that was really funny that I read about was apparently three of the co-stars in the movie were apparently actually arguing about John Carpenter behind the scenes. But the fucked up part about it is they were all mic'd up, so John Carpenter heard everything. He actually came up to him 10 minutes later. Like, I heard everything you guys said. And they were like, "Oh shit!" They were basically scared that they were gonna get fired. And they were arguing over some scene or some shit, and they thought like they thought that John Carpenter was making a bad call, and they kind of cussed him out for it. Yeah, that's what it was. So,
well, he had him right where he wanted him after that.
Yeah, like you might want to chill on what you said, because like, I know how you really feel now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take you out in any moment. Mm-hmm. Now, again, Nick Nolte was approached again for another John Carpenter movie. He turned it down again. I don't know why the hell Nick Nolte is turning down all these good ass movies.
But I mean, you can go down the list of questionable decisions Nick Nolte's made. So,
but these are really questionable.
We'll be here for the rest of the week.
Especially for his career, though. I'm like, God, like, look at this. Are you serious? Like, Nick Nolte turned this down. Nick Nolte turned that down. Like, God damn, Nick, take a movie, man.
His job, but he got drunk.
True. Now, the famous beard that worked out very well for Eddie Murphy. Now, the famous beard that Kurt Russell has in the movie as McCready took him a year to grow. So,
could have just used beer gum and got it done the day of.
Yeah. And apparently, Kurt Russell's favorite line in the movie is when the one character looks at the spider head crawling and says, "You gotta be fucking Shit. That line. That's Kurt Russell's favorite movie, and also my favorite line of the movie too. Cause like, yeah, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we just barbecued this thing and it's still going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was screwing me up too. I can't lie. Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else here. In terms of the, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said it's frustrating to be in that position. Like, you barbecued it and it's still going. That's what I'm saying. It's like a never-ending.
Extremely frustrating. Now, Keith David plays the character Childs in the movie. He's kind of like the main opposition from the McCready character. Now, there were several other black actors considered for Childs. Bernie Casey, Isaac Hayes, Jeffrey Holder, Ernie Hudson, and Carl Weathers.
What about Jim Brown?
I don't know Jim Brown, but all these other actors were considered, and they were with Keith David, which is a good choice.
Was OJ acting?
So
Was OJ acting yet? I think it was pretty close.
I think he was.
Could you imagine?
Well, AJ, he did Roots. OJ did Roots. So yeah, he was acting.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. But could you imagine him in that role?
No, I couldn't. I really can't.
I'm just saying because like he had some stuff there that was all right, but I mean, oh my god, dude, I it would have turned the thing into a damn comedy. I think.
I think it would have too. Also, some other people famous comedians that also auditioned for this movie: Jay Leno, Gary Shandling, and Charles Fleischer. Everybody was like, "Who the fuck is Charles Fleischer?" Roger Rabbit.
Oh, okay.
The voice of Roger Rabbit. Yeah, huh?
No, I said
Charles Fleischer's Robert.
Yeah, but what was Gary auditioning for? What role?
I think it's the character of Gnarls, played by T.K. Carter, the black guy in the skates, who was also a stand-up comedian at that time. They went with him. Yeah. Yeah, that's who got it.
No, I'm imagining Gary Shandling in that role.
As a black guy on the skates, yeah, I can or Jay Leno. Oh man. I'm trying to think of what else. Yada yada yada. Oh, apparently, remember the one scene where they had like the giant thing of one of the things on like a operating table, like Wilford Brimley, like taking it apart, just going through it and ripping out the organs and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently, Wilford Brimley himself was the only person that grossed out by that scene because the fact he was like a cowboy for real and raising hunting animals and gunning animals. So he's like this is pretty much like picking up his laundry. He said he's like picking up my laundry, man. It was nothing for him.
Well, I mean, if you've been a hunter and you've ever had to do anything like that, it's a different world from all the city dwellers. Just pick up their meat at the market.
Yeah. Apparently, of the negative reviews that were given largely for the thing, the one that really got John Carpenter's goat was one critic called him a pornographer of violence. And he's like, really? All these other movies I've done, this is the one that's a pornographer of violence?
I just think it's funny that they were going with it that early on because they had no idea how bad it was going to get in another 15 years.
Exactly.
By the time you hit Hostel and shit.
Or, oh my God,
Human Centipede or ugh.
Yeah. It would give a lot more gross, yeah. Or just like go to like 7 or like movies like that.
That was mid 80s, wasn't it? Like they already had freaking Trauma out there. Like that's the real pornographer of violence.
For real.
I mean,
for real, bro. Cause all it was like boobs and things exploding. That's basically all Trauma is.
Well, and that's what
now
on Carpenter because he doesn't even come close to that.
Nope, I agree with that. Now Carpenter's favorite line of the movie is one from McCready, where he's like, "Trust is a hard thing to come by these days," which to him encapsulates everything the thing is about. Yeah. It's one simple line. Trust is a tough thing to come by these days. It's really very well written line, man.
It's still true.
Yeah, it's true. And some other reviews, they really went in on the thing, man. I'm like, wow. Some critics described it as instant junk. a wretched excess, and one actually proposed it as the most hated film of all time. Like, really? However, some other ones praised the special effects and thought that was cool, etc., etc. But I'm like, wow, really? Now, the film itself, of course, found its audience on home video and TV, and it's since become a cult classic, and actually has been reappraised by a lot of those critics that shit on it when it was first released. And now it's been called one of the great sci-fi and horror films of all time. And a lot of other directors have noted how influential the thing is on their work. Now, in terms of some of the accolades that the movie had, it was selected again.
I just got to jump in and say that's a common theme that we keep seeing, especially with a lot of these older films that we kind of fall in love with, the cult classic stuff like that, is that a lot of times the initial reception is negative. And I think there's, to some extent, almost like a group think thing that's occurring, right? Because it's a small, like if you talk about, it's even smaller now than it used to be. But if you think about film critics that had any kind of a national or major regional impact, it's a really, really small and insular group. So you'll notice if you go back through a lot of these older films from the 70s and 80s, if you kind of watch it historically, a lot of them got horrible reviews from whoever it was, you know, be it Siskel and Ebert, or I mean, you can go for the Daily Variety, on and on and on down the list. And they go back after it's been 10, 15 years, and they'll look at them, they'll reevaluate because that's their business. And they look at it with a fresh mind, because it's almost like whoever the first one is out the door that hits it with, oh, this is a garbage thing. I mean, if they've decided the thing is crap and they've decided to write the most negative review they can, then nobody wants to be in a position to have to argue for the merits of something against somebody else, because now you get into essentially an argument over nothing more than aesthetic preferences, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything is subjective when it comes to film. There's movies you like that I don't like. There's movies I like that you don't like. There's movies that we all have. There's that friend who's like, it's their guilty pleasure or whatever it is. And it's completely But I think the really kind of sick twist that you keep running into with film critics in particular is that there's almost like this sensibility that we all need to agree. And if you don't agree with us, then you can get pushed out of the group. And it's unfortunate for stuff like The Thing, where it gets hammered and it has to be 15, 20 years later when you have enough of the generation that they didn't care about it. They're not involved in film critiquing. They're just fans who are now coming into filmmaking. They can come back and they can resurrect it.
Yeah. And like we was talking about, like since then it's been considered basically one of the greatest horror films ever made, a classic of the genre. Empire Magazine selected it for its 500 greatest movies of all time. Complex Magazine called it the 9th best movie of the 80s. They also called it the greatest genre remake film of all time. And also Entertainment Weekly ranked it as the 12th scariest movie ever made. And then other publications have cited it as like the best sci-fi movie, one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. IGN put it at number 4. Willis put it at number 12 on their list. Pace Magazine 31, Esquire Magazine 32, number 76 on Rotten Tomatoes, and the 9th highest, and is also named the 9th greatest horror film of all time by Rolling Stone. So it got its due.
Yep, it took a while, but they finally got there.
Oh yeah. They Live. John Carpenter's They Live. I love They Live, man. Like I said, the only thing I don't like about They Live is really the score.
This one's definitely more of a cult classic.
Very much so, yes. Now, it's based on a short story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nielsen for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction from 1963. Basically, it's more or less kind of like a Invasion of the Body Snatchers type deal. John Carpenter describes it as a DOA type of story in which a man is put in a trance by a stage hypnotist. When he awakes, he finds that the entire human race has been hypnotized and that alien creatures are actually controlling humanity. He only has until 8 o'clock in the morning to solve this problem. Hence the name of that original story. John Carpenter got the rights to that movie and used it pretty much as a critique of Reaganomics. More or less as a vehicle to take on Reaganism, as he calls it. Now, They Live was shot over 8 weeks from March to April of 1988, mainly in downtown LA, and it cost about $4 million to make. Several people were considered for the lead role of John Nada. Alec Baldwin, Michael Biehn, Brian Bronston, Michael Keaton, Tommy Lee Jones, Alexander Lambert. Christopher Lambert, Dolph Lundgren, Michael Madsen, Bill Paxton, Ron Perlman, Patrick Swayze, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Bruce Willis were all considered.
You know, as political as Alec Baldwin's gotten, I bet he kicks himself now for passing on this film.
Pretty much, yeah. And also Kurt Russell, since we talked about Kurt Russell. But John Carpenter's like, you know what? I just did like my last 3 movies with Kurt Russell. Let's go with somebody else.
Let's change it up.
Let's change it up a little bit. So he changed it up in a big way, and he picked Roddy Piper, Roddy Piper, WWE Hall of Famer, as in the role of John Nada. Now, I'm a huge Hot Rod fan, man. Like, if you ever see some of his promos, particularly from the 80s, on he had Piper's Pit, fucking hilarious. And then, of course, the fact he's also whipping folks' ass with it. So, like, it just makes it even better. And, like, and this also, with Roddy Piper, this also is a great debate with me. And Roddy Piper has mentioned this as well. Now, when the whole Hulk Hogan thing started in the 80s, they needed a great villain to kind of kick him off. The villain they picked was Roddy Piper. Now, that comes the great debate. Now, did he come to see these events to see Hulk Hogan? Or did you come to these events to see Hulk Hogan beat the shit out of Roddy Piper? Because they hated Roddy, man. Roddy had legit what they call heat. Like people hated Roddy everywhere he went, man. He was racist. He was mean.
I think he honestly, he's the guy who inherited the mantle from Andy Kaufman as far as wrestling goes. Like, Andy Kaufman, when he was involved in pro wrestling, was the most hated man in America at a minimum, possibly the world, until Roddy Piper. Yeah. I think it's a fair assessment because by then, wrestling was so much bigger. People had a better understanding of the genre and the language as to what's actually happening in the storytelling. And I mean, he was fantastic at being hated.
Exactly. And then the same thing, like why I think wrestlers get a lot of flack is because of the fact there's a part acting wrestling because they do a lot of improv, they do a lot of, the promos that they do, that's stuff they write themselves, you know what I'm saying? Then they have to convey a character, whether it be, bodybuilding from Venice Beach with huge arms, what you're gonna do, that kind of shit, or like a flamboyant macho man, that type of deal, or maybe even like a dude with a giant snake, or a dude who has like hedge clippers who's a barber, like whatever that character is, they have to convey it. They have to fully commit to it because if you don't fully commit to it, the fans don't fully commit to it. You know what I'm saying? So, and then on top of that, the physicality that comes with wrestling. Because of the fact that, you know what I'm saying, they're doing this stuff 300 plus days a year, they're in great shape. Some of them don't look like they're in great shape, but they're in great shape.
I mean, the reality is the one form of entertainment that is entirely dominated by stuntmen and women. Every last one of those guys is a stunt performer that's doing some crazy stuff. They're putting their bodies on the line in a lot of ways. They've got varying degrees of how good they are at acting as far as the character side of stuff goes. And the improvisational, but again, there are some killer stunt performers. Exactly.
Now, John Carpenter picked Roddy Piper specifically after seeing WrestleMania 3, which is the big one that everybody remembers because of the Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan match. Yeah. Now, he wrote the role of Nada, like Nada himself was like it's kind of like Roddy himself. It was unintentionally meant to be Roddy because Roddy was actually a person who was homeless at one point. He was a drifter. He was like anti-authoritarian and things of that nature, which is perfect for John Nada. So Roddy happened to encapsulate a lot of that. So, and apparently John Carpenter has been a wrestling fan ever since he was a little kid. Apparently he wrote a column for the Ring magazine when he was a kid too. So good for John. You know what I'm saying? And of course, Vince McMahon did not want Roddy Piper to do this movie at all. And then John Carpenter's like, yeah, I figured that. So what McMahon was doing, like, hey, don't do that movie. Just hang on a little bit, and then I'll find another movie, and you probably get paid the same amount of money. Okay, just hang on to that. Which Roddy knew was bullshit. But he just wanted to keep him around so he could work him a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of placate him. But because of the fact that Roddy was adamant on doing this movie with a major film director, John Carpenter, he actually had to quit the WWF to do it. So, funny enough, that WrestleMania 3 match is actually, quote unquote, retirement match for Roddy Piper.
Yeah, but
'Cause-
you got to keep in mind too, just in the whole
Mhm.
WWF thing and everything that was going on with McMahon, we can
Mhm.
get behind the scenes what was going on with him and Hulk Hogan, right? Because there's a lot of wrestlers
Mhm.
that hate on both Hulk Hogan and on McMahon because some of the shit they were pulling. So I mean, at least Rowdy was sharp enough and astute enough to be like, I'm getting played. I got to get out. I got to take my shot. Because
We're gonna do a classic. We're gonna do a classic WWF episode. I know we should. Dude, I think it'd be killer, man.
All right.
Yeah. But like I said, another main reason, the fact that he had to get away from McMahon because of the fact that McMahon is a control freak, which is very well known.
Oh yeah.
And funny enough, when Roddy said, when I came back, I was twice as important than I was before because I did this movie and I had all the star power. And then pretty much he could call his own shots there. And Roddy did come back for sporadic things in the WWF, but he would leave. He would come in for a run and then he would leave. He'd come in for a run and then he would leave because he could do that now because he was a legit movie star.
Yep.
So, yeah. And Roddy Piper, also married man at the time, he actually refused to take off his wedding ring for the movie. That's why you see a wedding ring on the screen. They never explained the wedding ring. So,
well,
yeah.
Give him a
Also,
to his wife.
yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. He was married to a lady named Kitty, pretty much his entire wrestling career. She pretty much like the fact, pretty much like from the 80s on, he was married to her, and she stuck with him through all that shit, man. So kudos to her. She was with him up until his death. So, but Roddy, the most famous line, of course, in the movie, "I have come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum." That was an ad-lib line from Roddy Piper.
When he kicks in the door at the bank, it's weird as fuck.
But it's so dope, though. Yeah. I come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass.
It's right after he just shot the two cops out in the middle of the street and took their guns.
Yep. And then he goes into a bank and starts like laying into motherfuckers with a shotgun and says this line first. And apparently, Roddy apparently kept a little notebook of different sayings he would say for like different wrestlers and different like promos and stuff. And John Carpenter read it. And he's looking at it. He's just fascinated by it. But then he saw the line, "I'll come in to chew bubble gum and kick ass and I'm all out of bubble gum." Dude, we're using that. We're so using that. So yeah, Roddy Piper came up with that famous line. And that's the one line that really most people remember from They Live. And the fact that, it's actually been used in erroneously credited, by the way, by the Duke Nukem series. Like, because the Duke Nukem video games or whatever, it's like, no, that came from Roddy Piper. That did not come from Duke Nukem. So, just so we're clear on that, folks.
Yep.
Yep.
Look it up online on that screen. You can find that clip all over YouTube and Facebook.
Oh my God, yeah. I think it's a meme now. It's one of those memes now, or a GIF or whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. It's both, I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure it is too.
And to be clear, the cops and everybody shooting in the bank, they're all like, the dead creatures, the Skeletors.
The alien creatures.
What do they call them? What do they call them?
I forgot the name of the actual aliens themselves, but yeah.
They'll basically look like the living dead, essentially.
Yeah, it look like corpses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, since we're talking about the famous scenes of the movie, the most famous scene and the one I love the most, the fight scene. Fight scene in the alley between Roddy Piper and Keith David.
Mm.
Now, John Carpenter even said himself when they were coming up with it, "We're about to start one of the great fight scenes in movie history." He actually said that out loud before they filmed it. And and he said the one reason I loved it is because of the fact it's not a flashy fight. It's just in terms of like guys doing kung fu all of a sudden and martial arts and shit like that. It's just two dudes in the alley going at it with what little fighting skills they got. so there's like headbutts and punching and kicking, biting motherfuckers and like kicking somebody in the groin. Just like regular moves.
It's far more realistic. I mean, very limited suspension of disbelief.
Now, this big realistic fight was actually choreographed, rehearsed, and designed in John Carpenter's backyard in West Hollywood. They spent over 2 months choreographing this thing in John Carpenter's backyard, and like to the point where they got it right. And they actually at one point, what was it? Oh yeah, at one point they actually do fight for real. That Keith David and Roddy Piper actually fight for real. They're like not faking. They only fake. Yeah, the only fake the hits to the groin and the face. Every other hit in terms of the body and all the other shit, that was real. This is crazy.
Yeah, but they're pulling the punch a little bit. They're not going full force.
Yeah, a little bit.
Roddy might have
And
had big arms.
yeah, and John Carpenter was so impressed by the scene how they did it. He kept most of it intact in terms of like the legit hits and everything. And then at one point, you see Roddy Piper do a suplex on Keith David, and when Roddy Piper proposed it to John Carpenter, he was like, "Can you do a suplex?" And Roddy Piper was like, "Which one?" Because there's different types of suplexes: the belly to back suplex, German suplex, and like and Roddy Piper was like, "You want me to show you?" He's like, "No, I'm cool." But but funny enough, John Carpenter actually did submit to the sleeper hold. He let Roddy Piper put the sleeper hold on to prove his validity. And yeah, it was valid.
Don't do that. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, hey, John Carpenter did it, man.
You're going to sleep. Just don't do it.
Exactly, yeah. Let's see. Yada. Here, pass on that. So I'm just trying to get to the stuff that's really good. Now, in terms of like because we talked about how the aliens look, how they look like rotting corpses and shit. Now, John Carpenter specifically didn't want the aliens to look like high-tech aliens from other sci-fi movies. He decided since these beings were like corrupting humanity, they should look like corrupt humans themselves. So I can see that. I can see that.
And look, it's not fantastic. I mean, it's not Rick Baker's work, but it's okay.
It served the purpose. It served the purpose. Yeah. Now, apparently, this movie and Alien Nation were the only two major Hollywood films at the time released in '88, and both movies deal with aliens assimilating to life on Earth. Whereas one is more blatant, Alien Nation, where it's like aliens are almost like immigrants, like coming in from another land. This is more like they already here. They've been here actually. We just don't know it. So,
yeah, they're hiding amongst us, plain sight.
Yeah, and then actually they do a great commentary track on this movie, Roddy Piper and John Carpenter. And he said John Carpenter actually pointed out that Roddy Piper has actually made more movies than John Carpenter.
Oh yeah, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then like John Carpenter's like, man, I've only made 20, and Roddy Piper's like, yeah, but you made 20 good ones.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so there's that. And one thing that really bonded John Carpenter and Roddy Piper is because the fact they both have anti-authoritarian streaks in both of them. John Carpenter said, "I've always had this adolescent hatred of authority, so it didn't take long for that kind of feel. So it doesn't take long for that kind of feeling, get that kind of feeling of what's going on. Like everybody's got their own little life, and everybody thinks that's it, and nobody's helping nobody. So that's how he feels about society in a lot of ways." And actually, apparently, at one screening of the movie at LA City Walk, he noticed that one little kid just walked out of the movie, and he was like confused by that. Apparently, the kid had been brought up on like Rambo movies, so he was like not really used to this whole like underlying undercurrent of control and all this other shit. So he was just expecting some action movie shit.
Yeah, but I mean, like, to be fair, there is always an underlying current of control and some weird stuff happening in all the Rambo flicks. But I get it. I mean, it's not as big bang, like, let's just go out and blow shit up as you get in the Rambo flicks or a lot of those other big action films from the 80s. I mean, to be fair, I guess a lot of those, they're a little lighter on the subtext.
Yeah. Oh yeah, apparently the Macho Man Randy Savage is also a big fan of this movie. Actually, a lot of the wrestling people are huge fans of this movie, and they've mentioned it in different interviews and stuff. Like Jim Ross and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes are huge fans of this movie. And Macho Man Randy Savage says his favorite line of the movie is, "Life's a bitch and she's in heat."
Yeah, there are some great one-liners in this one.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. And also John Carpenter actually had Roddy Piper and Keith David remain in character like whenever they could on set. And then like And then the thing about it was like freaking they were sitting there. The goal was pretty much for them to have somewhat of a camaraderie between each other. And Roddy Piper said, they came back and said, he said, like, what happened? What happened to you guys? He said, well, we didn't really have much to say, you know what I'm saying? Then we were together. And that was that. Like, so they were just like instantly comfortable with each other. So it wasn't really necessary for them to go through all that, which is cool. Also, Roddy Piper also credits this for jumpstarting the whole wrestler turn actor migration. This is an exact quote from Roddy Piper. I was the first ever wrestler in the history of wrestling to star in a major motion picture that was #1 at the box office. And it gave the itch to I don't know how many other wrestlers. To this day, but not one of them to this day has put out too many quality pictures or not ones that have been a #1 hit like this. There can be arguments.
Dwayne Johnson.
I was going to get to that, but I was going to say the other wrestlers that it led to get into the acting
Hogan,
game.
of course.
Well, Hulk Hogan is one of them. Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
Dave Bautista.
Stone Cold. The jury's still out on Bautista because he's just starting.
Yeah, but he's been in some #1 movies. So
I know, but that's what I mean. Like in terms of like compared to Roddy Piper, right? Like you can say right now because Dwayne Johnson's like the highest paid actor in Hollywood. He's made a ton of #1 films, that kind of thing. All I'm saying is that Bautista, he's 3, 4, 5 films deep. We don't know yet. I mean, this guy could surpass Dwayne by the time everything's done.
It's possible, yeah. Also, Batista, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, and of course, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. The movie opened November 88, November 4th, 1988. Debuted #1 at the box office. Total gross was $13 million. John Carpenter to this day is fascinated because it's his only movie that is opened at #1.
Wait, did you say total gross was only $13 million?
Domestic gross, excuse me.
Is that
total
for
domestic
the opening weekend or for the total run?
It says total domestic gross $13 million.
That seems 2 weeks. Pretty small for a #1 film.
Well, apparently it opened #1 and disappeared right after that.
Okay, so they had one good weekend.
Yeah, so. But yeah, like I said, John Carpenter is still to this day fascinated that this movie opened #1. So.
Yeah, well, when you look at the totality of his film catalog, it is kind of funny that that's his only #1.
Yeah. Now in terms of the influence, in terms of the influence of the movie, and this is one of my favorite parodies ever. The fight scene between Roddy Piper and Keith David was replicated on South Park, Cripple Fight, shot for shot. Actually, if you go on YouTube, there's actually a comparison of the two scenes, and it's shot for shot.
Oh God, I love South Park. Those guys are so funny.
And then I love that Cartman was going to different businesses talking about cripple fight. And the supermarket one was the funniest one. He was like, excuse me, shoppers. We have cripple fight outside. Cripple fight is outside. And everybody just loved to go see the cripple fight. And then of course the ending, but they're done, they're on the ground, both of the crippled kids are spent, and then the one guy is like, all right, now cut it out. They just went through this 5-minute fight.
It's a killer episode for sure.
Yes, it is, man. Also, another thing that it actually led to, the Shepard Fairey Obey campaign that we've seen in the streets for years and years now with the Andre the Giant face.
Yeah.
And Obey underneath that, the Obey he got from They Live. So if you see that sign or that artwork in the streets or whatever, you see it everywhere, especially the Andre the Giant face. And
you can now buy it as a T-shirt or a hoodie. So in that way, you can participate in Obey. So it's an anti-consumer sentiment, but the dude's made a bunch of money off it. In fact, I think he was doing pretty well until he got hammered for the Obama Hope setup that he did in 2008. Because that was
that was him too.
Copyright infringement based on a photo from somebody else. So from what I remember hearing, it sounded like he actually got hammered on that one in the copyright lawsuit. But buy the shirt, I guess, and help him pay his bill.
Actually, Green Day did did a homage to They Live in the music video for Back in the USA off the album Greatest Hits. So same thing. The punk band Anti-Flag also did a inspiration of their music video. So the music video for The Disease, like freaking like, yeah, a lot of anti-authoritarian bands love They Live, man.
It's an American pastime, anti-authoritarianism.
All right. And the last of the films we're going to be talking about here, Big Trouble in Little China.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The Kurt Russell classic.
Yeah, funny enough is, and I know this is actually the intention. I always felt that, Kurt Russell got way too much, like, credit for this movie because I believe the Asian dude is the real hero of the movie as opposed to Kurt Russell as Jack Burton.
But Kurt Russell got paid more.
A lot more. I know. Yeah. So the first version of the screenplay was actually written by Gary Goldman and David Weinstein. They were inspired by new wave martial arts movies that were sort of weird and they had special effects and they were shot against the background of Oriental mysticism and modern sensibilities. They actually had written a Western. They actually written it out initially as a Western set in the 1800s with Jack Burton as a cowboy that rides into town. But they decided to change it to modern times. Mainly Carpenter was one that brought it to modern times. John Carpenter apparently was first offered the project in 1985. He read the original script and thought it was utterly unreadable, though he found it had many interesting elements. John Carpenter re-envisioned the movie as sort of an inverse of traditional scenarios in action movies, where the Caucasian protagonist is actually helped by a minority sidekick. He turned that shit around. So Jack Burton in this movie, despite all his bravado, it seemed like is like bumbling and
Basically the green.
Like this all talk, don't really know what the fuck he's doing. There's like scenes where he gets knocked unconscious,
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. It's basically the Green Hornet, right? Where you got Bruce Lee as the chauffeur coming out and saving his ass all the time.
Great job, Kato.
Thanks for doing all the work. I'm gonna go back and take the credit.
Yeah. You usually Kato coming in, whooping everybody's ass, and then the white boy, the Green Hornet, get one punch in. Good job, Kato. Come here. Or he'll rough on the back. Come here. What's your thing? That kind of shit. But Kato usually did all the work.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about it was, problems kind of arose initially because of the fact the Golden Child came out around the exact same time. You know what I'm saying? So Eddie Murphy, Golden Child, they also had very similar themes in terms of the Oriental mysticism and shit. So in order to beat it to theaters, Big Trouble went into production in October '85, so it could open in July of '86, which was actually 5 months before the Golden Child came out. So beat it initially. Yeah, but of the two, I believe the Golden Child made more money.
I mean, look, I like Kurt Russell, but how are you going to compete with Eddie Murphy? Especially
Eddie
1980.
Murphy at his height. Yeah, Eddie Murphy at his height, Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get you on that. And also, apparently John Carpenter was not entirely satisfied with Boss Films, who did the special effects for this movie. Because Boss Films was known for Ghostbusters. They were actually established for Ghostbusters. And also they were going to do Die Hard. But yeah, apparently he didn't like he apparently thought they took on too many productions at the hand, and then some of the effects in the movie had to be cut down as a result. And apparently Richard Edlund said that they had no problem with the workload or whatever, but and that actually Richard Edlund apparently is a huge fan of Big Trouble in Little China. Apparently it's his favorite movie at the time to work on. So, with the exception of Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I mean, Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Apparently, the effects budget of this movie was just under $2 million, which Richard Edlund said was barely adequate.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on there, and again, that would be part of what hammered them. Rather than, I think they took on too much. I don't think they had the budget to handle what people wanted when it comes to the special effects side of things.
Yeah, and Kurt Russell said he based Jack Burton's speech a lot on John Wayne, which is why you're like, I actually see it. Because Jack Burton's make a lot of big braggadocious speeches like he's John Wayne. He does a lot of that shit. If you notice that movie, like, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Even his cadence kind of slows down like John Wayne.
Like John Wayne, yep. So I give you that. And then of course, Kurt Russell lifted a lot of weights and went running 2 months prior to the production of this movie to get ready for the physical demands of principal photography. Let's see what else. Since Kurt Russell was John Carpenter's only choice for the lead, they also suggested Jack Nicholson and Clint Eastwood, but when they both were unavailable, John Carpenter got his way and got Kurt Russell. So
worked out. It would have been really weird with Jack Nicholson in that role.
That would have been very weird. And Kurt Russell himself said about playing the role that Jack itself is a hero who has so many faults. Jack is and isn't the hero. He falls on his ass as much as he comes through on things. The guy's really kind of a blowhard. He has a lot of hot air, very self-assured, screw up. At heart, he thinks he's Indiana Jones, but circumstances are always way too much for him. Yeah, you can see that in the movie. I'm a badass. I'm gonna do all that shit, and then the actual shit happens. Like, oh fuck, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I do appreciate about Jack Burton. So.
Well, and I mean, look, honestly, it makes him a readily identifiable character for the average person, anyway, right? Because everybody wants to, it's kind of like, I know you don't watch It's Always Sunny in Philly very much, but like the Mac character, always talking about, I could do this and a roundhouse kick. If this guy came after me, I'd do blah blah blah. And then in reality, you just end up getting the shit beat out of you because you can't take on 10 people at once. Like that part of it brings it back into a sense of reality that you kind of can almost forgive all the mystical stuff. It's like we were talking about before. When it comes to sci-fi or something, the more outlandish you want your world and the activities to be around it, the more realistic your characters have to be. The more like centrally in touch with like a legitimate human condition or human emotion in order for the audience to connect. Otherwise, it's just like, all right, well, that was cool. I'm at Disneyland today. Man, you froze.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Kurt Russell actually confessed that he was actually afraid of making this movie because of the fact that John Carpenter did a couple of movies that were like a string of flops. Of course, they were going to be great cult classics, but at the time they flopped at the box office. But then when he said when we realized it was John Carpenter making, it's like, you know what? It don't matter. That's my friend. I'm gonna make a movie.
So, I mean, he gave him his break.
And it's like I said, Little Trouble, Big Trouble in Little China is still a cult classic, So it worked out.
I just mean, also, like it changed his whole life working with him on Escape from New York. So you gotta maintain those relationships. I mean, the people that last in Hollywood, as far as actors, directors, they're people who they remember who brought them. Essentially, you know what? You dance with who brought you to the dance. Yeah.
Okay, so apparently, according to the John Carpenter, the opening scene where Egg Shin, Victor Wong, when they're in the lawyer's office with Jack Burton, apparently that was a decision made by the studio in order to make Jack Burton more heroic. They didn't like the idea of Jack being the sidekick as opposed to the Asian guy being the hero.
What? In Hollywood?
And also,
that guy has to be the hero?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, the white guy has to be the hero. Yeah, apparently.
Not in the 80s. That never happened.
Right. and for the Asian cast member, his friend or whatever, Wang Chi, the first choice is actually Jackie Chan.
That would have been interesting.
Would have been interesting because, of course, Jackie would probably have been done all his own stunts and shit.
Yeah.
So the action would have been a whole nother level.
I was just saying, I mean, talk about a whole nother level. You've obviously seen Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And he's doing half that shit with a broken foot.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say this. The main thing that Carpenter wanted Jackie Chan for is because of the fact he had just seen Police Story in '85. Yeah. And remember, he did that with a broken pelvis.
Talk about a man who's done more with broken bones than most people do in their whole life.
Jackie Chan, yeah. But the main concern from studios that his English wasn't good enough because they saw him in another movie he had made called The Protector with Danny Aiello, and so you seen that movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they were just concerned because his English was so bad. It's like, the action is great, but his English is bad. So
his English is better than everyone else in Hollywood's Chinese. So
yeah.
Meet in the middle.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah. So weird, man. I'm trying to see what else. Oh yeah. Also, for the female lead, Gracie Law, they actually were pressuring John Carpenter to cast a rock star in that lead, so like Deborah Harry or somebody like that. And he went with Kim Cattrall. Now, Kim Cattrall actually said she was like, you know what? I'm happy to do this movie because of the fact it actually, she said, it supplemented her theater career at the time. So the studio didn't want Kim Cattrall because she had done like Porky's and Police Academy and movies like that, and it was like, we don't want that for whatever. Like, but she was drawn to the movie because of the fact she said, I'm not screaming for help the whole time. I think the humor comes out of situations between her relationship with Jack Burton, and she's also the brains. She's the brains, and he's the brawn. That kind of thing. You see that a lot in the movie, so I give it.
I mean, it especially for movies back then, it's, you know, the biggest problem you have with a lot of those films as far as for women, it's always holding the bag while the guy goes on the adventure, right? Like she's just also there.
Yeah.
You don't get that.
And also for the film's fight scenes, John Carpenter said he used every martial arts trick in the book. He used cheap gags, trampolines, wires, reverse movements, upside down sets. It was like photographing a dance. That's what he said. It's like, excuse me for the damn plane that's going over right now.
You know what? You can't hear the plane, but you can hear the birds pretty good.
Birds? Oh, yeah, and the birds. Yeah. Apparently some birds. Apparently there's like a nest of birds fucking right next to where I'm doing this right now.
They're just chiming in.
They're going at it.
It's ambient.
They're just trying to, do what they naturally do, but it's kind of disturbing.
Yeah. As long as they don't swoop in on you, it doesn't turn into a Hitchcock film.
True. I'll give you that. Now, the ending song of the movie was actually sung by the Coupe de Villes, which, of course, again, is John Carpenter's band. So, and apparently, like I said, Kim Cattrall said she would leave set every day at 4 p.m. and then that night would do a production of Anton Chekhov's Three Sisters. So she said she loved this movie because of the fact if she'd only be a theater, she would have to be a waitress, and she didn't want to be a waitress.
That works.
It works just fine. Yep. Yada yada yada. Body count was 46 people. The movie was released on July the 2nd, 1986. 8 days later, actually, Kurt Russell's son Wyatt Russell was born, who is the current, who's going to be in Captain America and Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney Plus as U.S. agent. So there you go. Apparently, it's overall it grossed $2.7 million on its opening weekend. Went on to gross $11 million in North America, which is well below the estimated $19 to $25 million that was projected by the studio. Apparently, it was released at the same time as Jim Cameron's Aliens. So that's what messed up this movie. Jim Cameron's Aliens.
That was a monster. It just destroyed everything at the box office.
So apparently one of the things that it engulfed was Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. Now
the movie itself, actually, the legacy of the movie, that the portrayal of like the demigod characters, where they had lightning and rain and thunder, the three Asian guys with the big wicker basket hats, shit. That interpretation was actually inspired Raiden, Mortal Kombat. So you see Raiden on Mortal Kombat with the wicker hat, and he's shooting lightning and shit. Even when I watched the movie, I was like, that's Raiden. I was like, this is Raiden from Mortal Kombat. I didn't know they did a Mortal Kombat movie already. So
10 years later, they just ripped it off, I guess.
Yeah, I think Raiden looks better in this movie than he actually did in the Mortal Kombat movie. Christopher Lambert is cool, but
first of all, Raiden in the Mortal Kombat movie is a white dude.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So
because apparently we could not find a single Asian actor anywhere in the world to play Raiden.
Despite the fact that the lead and the main villain of the same movie are both Asian actors.
But it was like, what was that? You're the MCU guy. What was the one where they had? I think was it Kate Blanchett playing the?
Thor Ragnarok.
No. There was the other one. It was a Doctor something. They got some or maybe it wasn't Kate, but they had some white lady playing what was obviously always an Asian character in all the.
Oh, Doctor Strange.
Doctor
It was Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One. Yeah.
That's who it was. I couldn't. I
Yeah,
just remember some white lady. And I was like, oh, seriously, today still.
Yeah. The character is usually an old Asian master, and then they made her a Celtic woman. And the reasoning behind that apparently was because they wanted to get away from the old ancient Asian master stereotype. That's what they said. That's what they said in their press release. So
it reminds me of the press release when they redid the live action version of what was it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And they said the reason why they cast regular actors to play the dwarves rather than actually getting little people to play the dwarves was, oh, well, we just wanted to make sure we had good actors. So instead of saving a shit ton of money on After Effects and CGI, we hired regular sized people instead of going with little people and actually giving them a gig. There's a, shit, I'm trying to remember his name. There's actually a stand-up comedian who's a little person who's got a hell of a funny bit about what they actually had at a march outside of Disney to protest them casting like all these regular size actors in it. It's just one of those things that's like, it doesn't make any sense at all. None whatsoever.
I agree. Also, the character of Lo Pan was also credited as an inspiration for the villain for Mortal Kombat, Shang Tsung. So Mortal Kombat was heavily influenced by Big Trouble in Little China. Yeah, and also one of the episodes of the second season of the 2012 reboot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Basically, an entire episode called Chinatown Ghost Story is basically an entire reboot, entire like homage to Big Trouble in Little China. They basically redid it with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I thought that was cool. The video they actually did a parody video from Gundam Style. You know, they did a parody of that called Lo Pan Style, and they also had a dude that played Lo Pan in the movie, James Hong, as in the actual video itself. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has been talking for years about doing a reboot of Big Trouble in Little China with himself. Apparently it's a very early process, and John Carpenter has been contacted about it, but it's still very early.
I would definitely watch that.
Yeah, and that's all I have for Big Trouble in Little China. You have anything else?
Nothing to add, at least not related to Carpenter anyway.
Cool. All right, so yeah, we just did another great deep dive into a great person that we really love. Like, there's a bunch of other movies that didn't even make the list that we both had on our list, like Starman and Vampires, Ghosts of Mars.
I mean, look, if we tried to, this would be like a 6-hour podcast, and I mean, not that we don't have the time, but nobody's gonna watch that.
Exactly. And then the thing about it is we did not do Escape from LA because of the fact we're already doing Escape from New York, and it's essentially the same fucking movie, just changed the locale.
Plus, we're all playing Escape from New York and Escape from LA right now in real life. We're basically
exactly. Yeah. So, but like I said, to John Carpenter, we salute you, sir. We always appreciate your films. We love your work, sir. And like I said, we're just two fans who, want to talk about your work, man. So if you ever get a chance to see this, thank you, bro.
Yeah, keep it coming.
All right, yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and converse with each other about the next episode of Dropping That Culture. But until that time, this has been Dropping That Culture with JD and AJ. I'm JD.
And I'm AJ.
You guys be careful out there with all this COVID-19, and we hope you all have a great day.
Stay healthy.
Dropping that culture. 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 Dropping that culture.